Vampire War for the Second City is a Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition actual play podcast presented by DM Fiat, with I, Dale, as storyteller. Please be advised that this podcast contains descriptions of gore, depravity, addiction, coercion, and other adult themes. This is not D&D. This is a game where we play monsters of the night who do monstrous things. They're all around you. The following is a text roleplay that the players of Vampire War for the Second City performed over the Christmas period. Originally, it was intended to be off-camera downtime, but things escalated to a point where I simply had to prepare this episode so that major plot points would not be left untold. Hope calls the coterie to a cafe in Brunswick off Sydney Road. Lots of Middle Eastern eateries, boutiques, and import houses around. The meeting place is a small tea shop with a fairly well soundproofed upper room that specialises in exotic blends. It's called the Rahat translates into something called Quiet Rest. And Hope's rented the entire room this night. She's wearing a steampunky getup, something with a bodice and a corset and a top hat and goggles that do nothing. The skirt's modest and the boots are shiny. There's a few pots going off to the side with a nice long table filling most of the room. Sitting across from Hope at the table is a young Middle Eastern couple. It's Ediz and Aaliyah wearing someone else's faces. Hope beams. I'm glad you could make time to come see us. The others should be here shortly. Not sure if Derek is bringing Emily and Slick. That's up to him if he passed that on. Aaliyah, presenting the persona of a uni student in her early 20s, nods. I do not normally seek the counsel of neonates, she says in her thick Northern African accent. Especially those outside my clan. I have walked this earth since the 18th century, but you have impressed me with what you have accomplished so far. Ediz shrugs. Yeah, she's right. Normally it's my job to rub shoulders with the unwashed masses, but that stunt you pulled before the prince has necessitated a personal touch. Aaliyah stares at Hope thoughtfully. If you are to help me obtain my rightful spot on the Primogen Council, and if your vengeful friend is to sit beside me, then we should consider ourselves allies at this time. Hope smiles and passes out cups, offers to pour tea for everyone assembled. I am honored that you are here, and I'll try to avoid wasting your time. So, what we are doing right now is what we in the coterie call pizza party. That's our code for getting together and sharing what we know and figuring out what the hell is going on. Usually, we talk about what we've been through and make plans for what's to come. And so far, it's worked well for us. I'm considering you honorary members, strong allies, if not coterie itself. As such, you may ask me any questions you want, and I'll answer honestly. You don't have to return the favor, but it would be appreciated. And I'm not going to ask anything that would put you at a personal disadvantage. Please let me know if I do, and I'll shut up. At any rate, we've got a heck of a lot of stuff to talk about tonight, up to and including a 5-year-old mystery and a very troubling conspiracy, as well as a lot of immediately applicable stuff to the current situation with Thornton. "Oh, I've got a question," says Ediz, making a show of busying himself with his phone as a waiter walks past, his face hidden behind the screen. "Why'd you make up that story about Aaliyah using you to bring in the flesh crafter? And what's your endgame with this?" "That is 2 questions," says Aaliyah. Hope laughs and waits for the waiter to do his thing, then depart. It's a mostly private room. It's not a one-for-one situation. Okay, so there were a number of reasons behind that move. First off, let's go back to patient 0 and why I had to betray you. Yeah, guess we get this out of the way first. So, when we brought in Martin, we copied his case file, decoded part of it. We knew there was a plague coming, and Squizzy's inner circle and Professor Cypher knew of it. But they were silent. We watched and worried and wondered what the fuck they were doing, but I had a pretty good idea. They were gonna let it hit, get a cure underway fast, let it rampage through the anarchs and the folks in court they wanted gone. I'd also passed the info about the plague on to the Baron, and she wasn't preparing much either that I saw, but then she doesn't have the resources that the Cam does. But evidently she had enough intel from the Goratrix Tremere to know that Patient Zero was a big deal. Backtracking this trail led us to Sage, who was one of the first afflicted by Patient Zero, but that took all night. You noticed us coming out of Derek's Haven. You told us you'd been following us from there after you appeared over in Northcote. You said that the Tremere and the Banu Hakim were working together and that you needed Patient Zero. You first promised to get the cure to the Anarchs once Cypher and the company were done with it. But then we started asking questions. You got more specific in that you'd do everything in your power to make sure the Anarchs got the cure. You also let slip that the Anarchs would get the cure eventually, but not as fast. So I came to some conclusions. Some of them were probably right. Some of them might be wrong. First conclusion is that you weren't spying on Derek's Haven by choice. Either someone tipped you off or had a premonition that got you watching that place. Tremere, or one of the Premontory clans, or one of the people Cypher has watching over Derek told him what was going on, and he told you to get down there and grab Patient Zero from us. Second conclusion was that you had just overheard the same info we had from the Northcote push. If we took the option to go save Jackie, you'd try to go nab Patient Zero yourself. Third conclusion was that if we told you no go and went after Patient Zero, you would just go, "Oh well," and walk away. We'd do the dirty work, and you'd be waiting outside with a few friends to ask for Patient Zero more forcefully, or you'd try to beat us to him. Fourth conclusion was that at the end of the night, you were making promises you couldn't keep, which is why you were throwing in a boon and a service. Once we handed Patient Zero over to you, and Cypher and company got a hold of him, they were under no obligation to give the cure to the Anarchs or do anything else that you discussed them doing. They might, and I'm sure you'd argue for it, but in the end, they didn't agree to it. Fifth conclusion was that you were trying to bait the hook with a bait specific to me. Hope loses her smile, and she's honestly a little sad. You'd be done digging on us. I'm the only one of the coterie besides Chimera who really has strong anarch ties, hell, who kept company with Jackie at all after all of this, and this felt like you were trying to target and tempt me. Hope grimaces, takes a sip of her tea, willing the blood to restore color to her face. I took that a mite personally, just a bit. She exhales. So, there's more to explain, but I'm curious to know which of my conclusions were right and which were wrong. Up to you if you want to correct me on any of them.
"Oh, very resourceful," says Aaliyah, genuinely impressed.
All of your conclusions are correct. Ediz carries a lot of weight as the sheriff, but it is that very position that would have compelled him to destroy Patient Zero once research on the cure had been concluded. Oh, and there was also that selfish reason that doing this would cause me to betray the Anarchs and burn every connection I'd been making over the course of 5 years. And we couldn't rule Cypher from suspicion, but that was the least of my worries. Yeah, says Ediz, lowering his head. Look, it wasn't anything personal, but the traditions must be upheld, and he was a masquerade breach. For what it's worth, I wasn't trying to play you or anything. Been following you for a while that night. All my intel was based on what you'd gleaned from the Northcote mob. Nah, it's fine, Hope smiles at him. Sometimes the only choices you get are bad ones. And for what it's worth, the rest of the coterie were strongly considering handing him over to you. But for me, I knew that regardless, if we wanted to keep options on the table, then we had to agree to get you out of there and get the job done. Well, I'm officially the sheriff of this domain, says Ediz, but if you haven't noticed, it's Larson who wields most of the actual power when it comes to enforcing the prince's laws. There'd be a brief amount of time to figure out how to proceed while you were gone, and maybe, just maybe, you'd save Jackie before we were done. Hope frowns and looks away. Yeah, Larson. Well, I'll pay him back in a bit. I have time now. Maybe. The sheriff position was a token role granted by Taylor to appease me, confirms Aaliyah. The previous sheriff was a holdover from Prince Lytton's practices. Removing him in favor of Ediz was a way to advance 2 agendas at the same time. Says Hope, understanding. So that's why he stepped down. Regarding the Tremere connection, she goes on, it is true that I have been offering the services of my clan to Cypher for quite some time, intelligence and blood sorcery rituals in return for some of the Chantry's thaumaturgy and Cypher's backing on my Primogen bid. Our plan was to present the cure to the court as a joint accomplishment between both of our clans, to add legitimacy to my claim and to allow Cypher to gain a foothold against Thornton Adams. Hope nods. I imagine Cypher would have followed through with it, which was a problem. And taking Patient Zero wasn't just double-crossing Ediz, but moving against you. And then I found out from Vince and Derek that you were an elder with a couple of centuries under your belt. Ma'am, I've never been so terrified. I watch people. I'm good at that. I try to figure out what they want, how they fit together, how I can maybe help them or slow them down if they're a problem. I have absolutely no frame of reference for someone who is 10 times my age, or more. So, to answer my question, Ediz, there are 3 reasons as to why I made up a story and gave your sire the credit. The most selfish and visceral one is that I had no desire to get on the bad list of someone who is old, patient, and probably has had a lot more experience in dealing with people like me, or better. So I had to make amends by offering something equivalent or better, and clearing the hell out of your way. The second reason was that I felt bad for betraying you. Yes, it was a bargain made under duress. Yes, it was a bad offer, but I did agree, and, well, I hope to reach your sire's age someday, and betraying allies makes that unlikely. The third reason is that I felt it unlikely that the conspiracy really threatening my coterie and myself had recruited either of you, and that by doing this we could eventually sit down at this table and talk about what's really going on and how we can maybe work together to get ourselves out of the frying pan, as it were. Hope drains the cup, leans back, and closes her eyes. Whew, a lot of talking. Jasmine's alright, but I think I'll try the Turkish blend next. You have a favorite? Oh, wait, 4th reason. We feel that there need to be more Primogen, and your sire seems like a good candidate, far as we can tell. Ediz exchanges a glance with Aaliyah. She nods. That is acceptable. You took an incredible risk, Aaliyah cuts in. If I so wished, I could have had you staked and left to meet the sun. But when Ediz informed me of your hearing with Prince Taylor, I admit I was curious enough to at least hear your story with my own ears. The only reason you are here tonight is because your play, as foolish as it was, provided me with another avenue with which to secure a place on the council. Furthermore, I am no longer beholden to Cypher and his thaumaturges. It was a gamble, yes, We're approaching the point in the game where our puppet master is starting to see us as loose ends to be tied up, so a gamble was needed. Besides, I've got the better part of 2 months making sure the court was seeded with rumors of my heritage in order to pad the way for my coming out. I didn't want to waste that by having to change my face or leave town. Hope takes a deep breath and bows her head to Aaliyah. But I'm very glad to hear that I've made amends for my offense. I will try to avoid doing so again in the future, though at the same time, I'm very glad we'll be working together, in the short term at least. There's much that needs fixing, and I think this will help the part we share go smoothly. Indeed, Aaliyah agrees, especially if one of your coterie is to sit beside me on the Primogen Council after Adams is brought to heel. At least one. Hope takes a sip of tea and smiles. I must say, Aaliyah says thoughtfully, reaching for a glass of water in front of her, I have not been in many domains where a neonate only 5 years dead would be considered for a spot on the Primogen Council. Perhaps in a small city, but not in a crown jewel of the Camarilla. This tells me that either Prince Taylor is desperate for allies, or he is weak, or both. I don't have a lot of room for comparison, to tell the truth, Hope says. I was made in Los Angeles by a fellow who literally had his minion hit me in the head with a shovel, and I flew out of there that very night. This is the first domain I've ever seen, but, well, Prince Taylor reminds me of some pretty bad managers I've worked for. Not the worst, but he's making a lot of mistakes. And his child. Killed the child of one of his own Primogen. That's, not gonna win him an ally there. Aaliyah peers around the room to make sure it's still just Hope, Ediz, and herself, and she leans in across the table. Where I come from, princes are often ancient, 5 centuries old or more, perhaps even an entire millennium. In my neonate years, I served as a spy for a prince who was regarded as a living god by Romans. My sire did the same, but for a prince who once had the ear of Cyrus the Great. Prince Taylor would barely be considered an ancilla in any of these domains. As such, he makes the mistakes of a child. Romans? Hope coughs. Oh my god, that's... wow. Okay, thank you for that. I'll make a note to mention that, never. But in regards to Prince Taylor, I think I have some notions as to why he's screwing up so badly. Probably best to wait for the rest of the coterie to get here, though. I need them on hand for some of the infrastructure and recounting of why things are in the situation they are. I will say that it did seem weird to me when I learned about court that one of the first rules is don't kill other kindred, and that the prince of the city had got the spot by killing and eating the last one, blatantly. I'd kind of chalked it down to realpolitik at the time. It seemed like a very might makes right society all the way around at first, but I'm guessing it's not that way elsewhere? That people, like, at least have subtlety about it? Oh, hey! Hope's eyes glow momentarily as she remembers something. Ediz, question for you. When did people around the court start talking about me being a Zemise? Ediz peers across the room in thought for a few moments. Actually, I'm not sure when it started flying around. The rumor started with the Traitors, I'm pretty sure of that. Remember, because Squizzy tasked me with finding out if there was any truth to it. A whole bunch of them seemed to think so, but it was still just hearsay. Wow. That means the Anarchs kept my secret all these years. Hope smiles. Now I feel better. Thank you. Well, the Traitors must have heard it from somewhere, Ediz replies. Did it surface during the last few months? Yeah, must have been, he finally says, after thinking about it. Then they heard it from me. Hope smiles. I was laying some groundwork there. Interesting gambit, says Ediz, obviously impressed. Surprised you're not one of them playing the court gossip like that. Well, I have made some very good friends among them. I don't know. I like to think that if life had gone differently, I might have been one, but honestly, I'd have been just as happy being awake during the day and enjoying a good dinner every now and then. Water under the bridge. But no, the secret would have come out eventually, so I needed to get a hold of it and make sure the narrative was framed. Hope feels like she's boasting a little. During her downtime, she's been chatting quite regularly with a Toreador and Scylla by the name of Maestro, subtly planting seeds of her true heritage. Maybe she is boasting a little, but it's good. Her read on Ediz and Aaliyah is that they're decent enough folks, and this chance doesn't come too often. But maybe I'm talking about myself too much. Who are you two? Where are you from? What you do in life? How'd you end up here? Hope stands to refresh the tea. Ediz shrugs. I used to race a Charger around Brickies in the 70s. One night, this strange lady's sitting in my car, and I look up from changing the caliper. No clue how she got into the chop shop, let alone my car, without me noticing. I thought she was a copper here to bust me for street racing, but she just smiles, tells me she has money riding on me in the race that night, and if I won, she'd give me a reward beyond my wildest dreams. As he finishes talking, he looks over at Aaliyah, who continues the story. There were rumors that Sydney was under the rule of a Setite prince at the time, she says calmly. I was new to this continent, had been placed as the advisor to a Banu Hakim judge, and I had been ordered to embrace somebody who was connected to Prince Sarasin's interests. It was known that he was in charge of a car smuggling ring. You've evidently taken well to this life, Hope smiles. So it must have worked out, and you, Aaliyah, it looks like you chose well. She nods imperiously. With the assistance of Ediz, we were able to trace some stolen cars to a recently embraced Setite neonate. When I captured him, I was able to get him to divulge that he had been working under the guidance of the prince. That confirmed the suspicions held by my benefactor, and as a result, when our clan agreed to join the Camarilla, I was chosen to establish our presence in this city. As for myself, she pauses for a moment, perhaps deciding how much of her story she wishes to divulge. I was the daughter of a wealthy merchant in Marrakesh. In the year 1768, I hunted down and took the life of the man who murdered my father and defiled me. It transpired that he was a retainer for a vizier of our clan. His domitor decided, evidently, that I was a more useful asset. Hope nods, impressed. I don't know what Marrakesh culture was like for women in 1768, but I'm glad you did that. It can't have been easy, and closure is important. Viziers. I don't really know much about your clan at all. Sage's short summary was basically, think of an entire clan of John Wicks. Now imagine them with super speed, and they can go invisible, and now make them wizards. That's been all I've had to go on. That and Ediz's example as sheriff. Aaliyah shakes her head, a hint of sadness on her face. I barely remember it. I only breathed for 19 years. There are not a lot of viziers among the Banu Hakim now, she says, in response to Hope's question. Our clan once had two castes, the warriors and the viziers. The warriors were those who stalked and hunted and killed, while the viziers listened and watched and judged. When the decision was made to join the Camarilla, many of the viziers, most of them ancient and stuck in their ways, chose to remain independent. And the few that agreed shared the secrets of blood sorcery with the warriors. Now we are simply Banu Hakim, the children of Hakim. Oh, okay, so there's actually another branch of the clan out there. Oh, wow, okay. Hope's eyes flicked back and forth. I have a feeling it wasn't an amicable split, but maybe that's rude. So, 19 years. Actually, that's a question I need to know. Hope glances up. How long does it take before you start forgetting? Is there anything I can do to slow that down or keep it from hitting as hard? Aaliyah gives Hope a sympathetic look. It's perhaps the first trace of actual emotion Hope's seen from her thus far. The smaller the fraction of your existence that it occupies becomes, the more it fades. For me, it was around my 50th year when I began to realize I could remember only very little from the time I drew breath, like a dream, a simple prelude to the gift of Cain. Speak for yourself, cuts in Ediz. I still remember the thrill of the race, the purr of the engine, the smell of gasoline. That is because you still drive automobiles these nights, every night, says Aaliyah coolly. You were a bit older than 19 though, yeah? Hope studies Ediz. Well, I'd been racing since I was 17. Fake IDs were much easier to pass off as real back then, but you're right, it wasn't embraced until I was 28. But Aaliyah, you moved from one life to an existence completely alien to what you were doing by the sounds of it. Ediz has been able to remain a bit closer to things. I'm guessing you still keep an eye on the circuits, yeah? As much as I can, Ediz says. Don't mention this to him, but I've always thought that Ventry friend of yours has a pretty sweet ride. I'm a bit partial to classic American muscle myself, but it's quite clear when someone loves their wheels. Vince is late, fashionably so. with an uncanny sense of timing. His voice carries up the stairwell. Muscle cars are a liability, too sluggish in the corners. As he steps into the room, he looks Hope up and down. What's with the get-up? I felt like dressing up. It's been a good few nights. She smiles. Man, it's good to see you, Vince. Pull up a chair, try some oolong. Oh, hold the cup and pretend to be civilized and all. Fair point, says Ediz, obviously embarrassed that Vince overheard him. But muscle cars fly on the open road more than any ricer will. Aaliyah gestures for Vince to take a seat at her side. We must get accustomed to it if we are to be primogen together. Taking a seat, Vince removes the lid of a teapot and inhales a scent of the leads. Formosan? He turns to Ediz. Never heard of VTech, have you? Ediz brushes his hand in the air. We didn't have that crap in the 70s. We had to drive the car ourselves. Aaliyah sighs, exasperated. Ediz, please do not antagonize Mr. Merriweather on the topic of automobiles. Ediz seems to ignore her, just laughing and holding out a hand to Vince. Tell you what, Vince, if you're interested, let's head out into the suburbs and try a few laps sometime. My Charger against your CRX. If you win... Enough! Says Aaliyah, sternly. Ediz doesn't finish his sentence, but he keeps his hand outstretched, letting Vince know he's serious. Vince takes Ediz's hand perhaps a little too eagerly, though he doesn't say a word. Been a long time since he raced anyone. Gonna have to practice. Hope stifles a chuckle. Oh, on another note. She reaches into her purse, pulls out an envelope. Vince, got you a new alias and ID for when shit hits the fan. Vince grabs the envelope tentatively. He raises an eyebrow. What's the name? Open it up, says Hope, mischievous smile on her face. Vince takes his seat. He grabs a small bread knife from the center of the table and uses it to slice open the envelope. He tips the fake identity documents out on the table. He lets out an audible sigh as he holds up the fake driver's license. The name is Chad Manley. Oh, excellent, says Ediz, perhaps a bit too excitedly for someone of his stages. He quickly composes himself. 3 nights from now, we'll take a spin through Reservoir. You're on, Chad. Aaliyah glares at him. Vince looks Hope in the eye. I hate you, he mouths. Good idea, says Vince, gesturing to the envelope in Vince's hand. Once you take down Thornton, your name and Haven might be compromised. Vince pockets the ID nonetheless. Duly noted. Hope's grin could grate cheese. Where's Chimera, by the way? She's usually your shadow. Actually, interrupts Ediz, suddenly thinking of something. I know you like living it up in that apartment of yours, Vince, but if Thornton is tied to the SI, then you really need another place to stay. I've got a couple of safe houses around the city. Keep them as places where hounds can lay low. Look, if you happen to win our little race, I'll give you one of them. Might even get a few retainers to watch over it for you. Vincent's already texting Chimera before Hope finishes her question. Shouldn't be long, he says, not looking up from his phone. Said she was right behind me. Hope's eyes open at Ediz's offer. Hey, that's a sweet deal, man. You'd like it better than rooming with me. Aaliyah purses her lips. Ordinarily, I would object to Ediz simply offering up clan assets as prizes, but if you are to be the new ventral primogen, then security is of the utmost importance. Vince turns to Ediz. Alright, you're on. 3 nights from now. He hopes that's enough to brush up his racing skill for a bit. Anyway, you haven't missed much, says Hope. Mainly the explanation I owed Aaliyah and Ediz for my gambit with the phone call, and my apologies. Oh, I did explain pizza party etiquette and how we do business here. Past that, it's been socializing. I've got some juicy intel, but it should probably wait until everyone's here so we can pool our knowledge. Very well, says Aaliyah. I have information on Elliot Palmer I will divulge once everyone has arrived. And I've got some juicy bits on Thornton. Be interesting to see how they overlap. Squeaking and creaking up the stairs, Chimera wanders through the door and immediately recognizes what must be Ediz and Aaliyah amongst the familiar faces. The nearest chair is snatched by the back and spun around as Chimera straddles it, looking forward on the rear legs. Oh, sorry I'm late. Vince left me to park the car. It's making a weird noise, by the way. She shoots him a glance. No, I didn't do anything. It was doing it itself. Oh, hey. Want to blush up and try some tea? Says Hope. I'm thinking we need to tell our new allies about the conspiracy. You are the Anak that has attached herself to Vincent's coterie, says Aaliyah, as Chimera takes a seat. I found your confidence in the face of Prince Taylor refreshing. Chimera's indelicate entrance elicits a grimace, quickly suppressed from Vince. Vince chuckles performatively. Ah, that's our mutt. There's no power laced in his words this time. Oh, conspiracy, says Chimera. That sounds serious. She sniffs the air and the mixture of teas is enticing. Yeah, deal me in with whatever you're drinking. Never been one for it, but it smells great. Hope goes for some of the Turkish blend and slides a cup over. Suddenly, colour bursts into Chimera's lips. She rouses the blood. She grabs her cup, takes a sip, and then turns to Aaliyah, meeting her eyes. I didn't mean to set the prince off. I was just being honest. Aaliyah gives Chimera a genuine smile. Everyone gets the feeling he doesn't do this often. Prince Taylor is a child playing with dolls. He is to remain in control of this domain. Then he needs to hear dissent. Resistance will test whether or not he can rise to the task. There's a lot of things he needs to be doing, Hope says, frowning. But the time to start that was decades ago. Given what we know about him, it's no surprise he's weak. I confess I am curious, says Aaliyah, contemplating Vince in his immaculate dinner jacket, and then turning her attention to Hope and Chimera. As a coterie, you seem to hold loyalties to the Anarchs and the Camarilla. Ordinarily, I find the political opinions of neonates to be worthless, flawed by youth, but I wish to know what you feel about the current state of the city. Hope sucks her teeth. This much we believe we know. Decades ago, Thornton Adams and Professor Cypher backed Squizzy or manipulated him into drinking the former prince. Aaliyah nods. It is an open secret that Prince Taylor performed the amaranth on the previous prince. It seems that this infamous reputation has been the main reason why none have challenged him before the Anak uprising. Chimera, meanwhile, glances at the ornate cup in her hand. It's unfamiliar, and she isn't used to its shape, resulting in a sort of finger twister to hold it comfortably, unintentionally, with a pinky finger sticking out. She looks up at Aaliyah. The state of the city before or after we met with the prince? Hope continues. Then Thornton basically promoted Maria into the primogen to add legitimacy, using threats against Jackie to keep her in line. The situations continued until recently. The domain has been in much the same state since Prince Taylor claimed Praxis, Aaliyah says, answering Chimera's question. Take your pick. Before or after you met him, they are both the same, very much so. Hope waits for Chimera to answer. Everyone will have their own specific views, she knows. You say that Thornton promoted Maria into the primogen. As I understand it, this was to appease the Toreador who remained in the Camarilla and are still holding loyalties to Prince Lytton, Aaliyah says. It was, Hope nodded, but she's been Thornton's pawn ever since, and now that leverage is gone. With Jackie. Seeing Chimera struggle to hold her cup, Vince takes her hands and guides them into a more comfortable position. He addresses Aaliyah. Pollies are pollies. Bunch of wankers. Cam are less chaotic, but the Anarchs are less spineless. Slightly. But us, we get shit done. Come together. Chimera nods in agreement. Before we met the prince, the city was a confusing mess. Bizarre lines drawn in the sand. Threats from the tower that we laughed at from our sheds and bikes. Then the blood hunt was called, and it seemed to feel kind of real for a minute, like the prince meant business. She takes a sip of the tea, finds it more enjoyable than expected. But after meeting him, it all made sense. He's spineless. The line's in the sand with that of a confused, angry baby. Nothing was properly enforced. If he tried that shit in the Anarch circles, someone would have staked him already. He's no leader. I agree, says Hope. Man doesn't know the difference between leadership and authoritarianism. Tyrion Lannister said it best. Anyone who has to remind you that he's a king really isn't a king. That said, Hope sighs, up until he got a bug in his bonnet over Baron Sue, it made for a situation where Anarchs and Camarilla could basically exist without a ton of hassle. I don't know what the situation is elsewhere, but my read is that Melbourne seems to be well served by having both sides in it, and with at least semi-open lines of communication and intermingling. And, Vince speaks up, enunciating the word clearly, I think you'll find I have been offered a spot on the council, despite my connection to the Anarchs. Hope nods to Vince. Yeah, that's something else I need to talk about. I have worries there. Aaliyah nods approvingly. She takes a sip of Turkish blend and begins to speak. You are still a fledgling, and yet even you can see how weak Prince Taylor truly is. In my considerable experience, such princes only manage to maintain control of their domains for a short time, decades at most. Now, with an uprising from Tien Su looming, an inquisition waging war against the city's kindred, and Sabbat infiltrators acting undetected within the domain, his control has tethered to the point where it is only a matter of time before he is deposed. She turns to Hope. I confess I do not know this King Lannister you speak of, but his words ring true, and... She takes another sip of tea. If there are any concerns regarding Mr. Merryweather's place on the council, then we should discuss them now. Oh, it's not about his accepting it, says Hope. That's a spot we've been trying to get him lined up for months. I knew a king, back in my breathing days, said Ediz, reminiscing. My sister was obsessed with that weird jiggling dance he did. Aaliyah shoots him a glance. It's not about whether Squizzy and his puppet master will carry through on that particular bargain. It's about whether they might back out. Aaliyah frowns. Prince Taylor made the arrangement with the seneschal, the sheriff, and the scourge in the room. He would lose face if he recanted his offer. He would, but it's a moot point if we're all dead before he has to make good on it. Chimera nurses her tea. She's listening to the discussion going on around her, finding it conflicting. Clearly having an Anarch insider on the council would do good for destabilizing the Cam even further. But there is talk about the Cam's existence going forward, like the plan isn't to just take it all down right now when they can. That's going to need to be followed up on. It's, says Hope. Okay, I really wanted to wait until Derek showed up, but I think we need to fill you in on what's really going on. What we suspect is happening, and how we think it's going to end. At least, if we don't do anything to change course. Aaliyah nods and leans in closer to the coterie across the table. Very well, tell me what you have learned. So, 5 years ago, we woke up in a meat locker. Newly turned, everybody but me was from Melbourne or regions around. Looking back on it, it was a mixed group, with Sombra, Sedite, Toreador, Nosferatu, Tremere, and one little Zemise. Except Vince and Chimera here, adds Ediz, but their being attached to Hope and the others doesn't strike me as an accident. We bust out of there, through an easy lock, one single night watchman, run into a guy named Marcus. He gives us the basics, helps us get to a place we can hunt, the Cicero. Gives us a phone with contact info for Jackie and Sage. Then he has to leave stage right, pursued by the Second Inquisition. But later on, when I learn more, this seems very suspicious to me. We survive the night and go with Jackie, who also gets chased by the Inquisition, but escapes. She says she had a deal with Marcus to help house found newbies until they could be sorted. So we spend the night at Sage's dive bar, and while we're figuring out what to do next, Jackie gets a call from Father Patrick, wants his child to visit him in Elysium. Members of my clan were surveilling this ventral Marcus, a At the time, says Aaliyah, nodding, we divulged that he had been in communication with an unknown party who provided him with the coordinates of a number of Second Inquisition locations. That is likely how he was able to find you. That lines up, says Hope. God, I wish I knew more about how Marcus fit into the Ventrue power structure. Anyway, I got told to pass myself off as a caitiff or I'd get my head chopped off, so I go along and I do that. Father Patrick tells us we're going to be a troubleshooting team for the Prince, and he's graciously going to be our benefactor. Then he dominates Sylvia to make sure she does the first mission in front of us. The mission is to go take care of the Second Inquisition team that's in town. We managed to do it with no fatalities, barely, and find Marcus's severed head in a specimen box in the trunk of their truck. Then we get left to our own devices for a few years. Half the team rabbits, fucks off and says to heck with everyone else, which, hey, fine. We knew each other for all of one night. Marcus was likely the victim of a daylight raid, says Aaliyah thoughtfully, but I am not sure how they learned the location of his haven. My own agents never could. I'm pretty sure that the mastermind wrapped up a loose end, Hope says. This is a pattern I'll get to in a bit. Anyway, the next job we do for Squizzy is rescuing a Second Inquisition turncoat from a guy named Spider. We do so, find out that he supposedly turned code in exchange for the Embrace, and he brought a ton of coded info with him. I make a copy, and we share it around to the Anarchs and the Tremere. We also bring in Spider, who gets spared by the Prince and bloodbound by him. Also, during our saving Martin, Larson shows up and offers us a favor if we hand Martin over to Larson for killing and pretend that Spider killed the guy. We talk him out of the idea. You are referring to Taylor's child, Martin, says Aaliyah, who provides the Prince and the Seneschal with intelligence on the Inquisition's activities. That's the guy. About this time, we're starting to get sick of Father Patrick blood-bonding Sylvia. We're noticing his generally suspicious behavior. We want that to stop. Shortly after, we get sent to clean up the nightclub. That's where we met you, she nods at Ediz, and where Vince joined us. You know, the evidence we found there, we shared it with you, Ediz, and you reported it up the chain to Aaliyah. At the time, I petitioned to have Martin embraced into my clan. Aaliyah reveals a cup, tinkling as she lowers it carefully onto the saucer. To be Ediz's child, but the Prince would not agree. He claimed Martin had to be directly accountable to the Prince and Seneschal. Says Hope. And Seneschal. Makes sense. Ediz nods. That evidence you're mentioning, that would be one of your sire's creations, right? At the nightclub? I didn't know it was my sire at the time. I figured why the hell would he be here? I was a shovelhead. Why chase me, and how would he know I was here in the first place? But you saw the footage. Anyway, we find the Thin Blood Lady's journal. It sure seems to point to Father Patrick. We manipulate things to get a private audience with him, as you recommended. And he tasks us, the Prince I mean, with gathering evidence, taking down Father Patrick. Might I say, says Ediz, looking at Chimera, that was the first time I saw Vince's car, and even though I couldn't show it, I knew a guy who drove that would get shit done. Despite herself, Hope giggles. Then she shakes her head. Okay, so we get a tip-off from our Thin Blood friends around New Year's Eve. We hear a Thin Blood of theirs is getting threatening phone calls. It turns out it's because her sire, Duke, has footage that his sire sent to him before she died. Aaliyah frowns. The Seneschal believed at the time that you were the most likely architect behind that incident and the abomination Ediz discovered, but I did not believe it, not at such a young age with such diluted vitae. Thank you, Hope nods. As I told Ediz, I am 5 years dead, and in life my longest running job was barista. It's interesting the Seneschal put it forward, though. It definitely reinforces things. Yeah, says Ediz. I remember now, and the Prince agreed to hold on to that piece of info to use against you if you ever crossed him, which did later happen. Couldn't be helped, Hope shrugs. Anyway, were you there when we played the footage for Squizzy and the Primogen? I honestly can't remember. It had been a horrible night. Basically, we went and took care of Father Patrick. Sylvia got her revenge. Both of the Banu Hakim nod. Yeah. So you saw Palmer talking with Father Patrick, telling him to sire a child, and referring to her mysterious benefactor. Aaliyah purses her lips. Until that point, Prince Taylor had vehemently denied the presence of Sabat in the city. The revelation of Patrick's true loyalties caused him to lose a considerable amount of face. Engineered by Thornton Adams, no doubt. Well, that's what we thought at the time, says Hope. And this did serve Thornton's goal. There was more to it than that. We were left alone for a good long while after that. Figured Squizzy blamed his loss of face on us. Ediz frowns and folds his arms, looks at Hope, narrowing his eyes. Then the blood plague hits. Right. We were at the first time it cropped up in public, at the Adarks, at a rave, invited by Baron Sue. We learn that she thinks Sage got hit by it because she's been gone for a while, and that she's been sitting on the info for reasons? Loyalty? Maybe? Jury's still out on that one. We have a meeting with her and the warlords, and they ask us to investigate. We hit the hospital, turn up a ton of info, including this. Hope reaches into her pocket, somewhere in the folds of her steampunk dress, pulls out her phone, looks, scanning the room to make sure no waiters are around, and then plays for the Banu Hakim, the recording of the Second Inquisition agents talking in the morgue. Once the recording ends, she slides her phone back into the folds of her dress where it came from. That girl would be a far more effective prince than Taylor, says Aaliyah. She commands the Anarch court the same way her sire commanded the Camarilla. She does, says Hope. That's what makes me wonder. Chimera joins us around this time, I think. Hope nods at Chimera. Things are a mite hazy after I got infected. I understand Prince Lytton embraced Sue in 1854 during the Gold Rush. She is not a petulant baby as Taylor is, finishes Aaliyah, seemingly ignoring Hope's summary of recent events. Yeah, she's something, says Hope in a flat voice. Could be one of the prime architects, but please, my lady, you're going to want to hear this. This is going to blow your mind. Anyway, we do some digging after we've got Sage. Her ghoul, who we saved from the hospital, points us to Northcote. That's where you come in. Over on the other side of the table, Chimera is barely able to keep track of what is happening. She politely nods in Hope's direction. Inside, she just wonders how this will eventually lead to getting to punch the prince in his smug face. So the Second Inquisition bum rushes us down in the tunnels, or tries to. Derek sees it coming. They set off a fuck ton of booby traps that we bypass, and then they die to rats afterwards. And I make off with Stan, for reasons already explained. The Anarchs get to work on a cure. Now, while all this has been going on, we've been running a sting to track down the Flesh Crafter. Early on, months back, during the first pizza party, we learned that Thin Bloods have been disappearing. We believe that the Flesh Crafter was snatching them to add a spiritual dimension to the virus through their alchemy. So Slick volunteers to be bait. We implant him with some kind of Tremere tracking stone thingy and tell him to learn alchemy and wait. While I'm waiting, I get word that Spider wants to blood hunt me. I find out he has a Thin Blood, Duncan Wells, helping him. We found out their plan is to spy on me, and when I leave my haven, when Slick gets grabbed, follow me and ambush us on the way. We decide to sprig the ambush first before dealing with the Flesh Crafter. All done on my orders, says Aaliyah, with another rare smile, taking another sip of tea from her cup. Oh yes, all done on your orders, Hope smiles back. Anyway, we kill Spider during the fight. Accidentally, Hope's face flickers with a moment of guilt. We take Duncan staked. I squirrel him away for later. Find ourselves outside the factory up near Bendigo, and that's where I call you, she points at Ediz. Been planning something like this for a while, ever since I texted you and asked you to play along. Then we go in. Well, and you've seen the footage from that. Couple things you might have missed. He flat out gives up Adams and has evidence on his computer, conveniently placed, no password. We just walk into the room, and there it is. And during our monologues, he mentions that he won't name his benefactor, but to be careful because right now we're playing right into his plan. Aaliyah shifts in her chair and then tenderly touches a hand to her cheek. With the remedy to the plague nearing completion, your sire had outlived his usefulness, and with Thornton Adams leveraging pressure on the prince as the plague unfolded, the prince's influence is now nearing breaking point. Your suggestion, therefore, is that Thornton's purpose has been fulfilled and he is nothing more than a loose end to be disposed of? This would imply that whoever has set this plot into motion does not intend for Thornton's bid for Praxis to come to pass. Yeah, says Hope, nodding slowly. It's a multi-level conspiracy. One person gets told one thing, thinks he's in on the top level. Another person gets told another thing, and he believes that's the true goal. Hang on, let me show you a clip. I recognize this move, because I've seen this damn movie before. Hope reaches into the folds of her dress once again, retrieving her phone. She brings up YouTube and begins to play the clip from the opening of The Dark Knight, the one where Joker pulls the bank job and has his mooks execute each other until only he's left. It's fiction, but somebody got inspired, and I think I finally know who. This is something that Malkavians are known to do, says Aaliyah, listening to the Joker's laugh. The madness is merely a game and these people merely pieces. Yeah. And do you remember what Squizzy did immediately after Thornton was exposed by Vincent? He started to order Thornton blood hunted. Then he stopped and looked to Specs. Yeah, and then suddenly Squizzy of all people has the foresight to give Thornton time to dig his own grave, Ediz scoffs. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. They gave it away when they did that. They fucking knew Thornton was guilty before he stepped in to Squizzy's manor that night. We didn't tell them beforehand. We turned the evidence over that night. They had the plan ready to go to dispose of Thornton. And it gets better. Last night, I finally had the free time to unstake and interrogate Duncan Wells. And he doesn't know a lot. He's also coy on a few things, but that's fine. What he did know is that Spider didn't find Martin on his own. A mysterious benefactor, a voice on the phone, told him where to go, and Martin was there, unguarded. He snapped Martin up, and then was surprised when we came along. Then Squiz goes and blood bonds him, but not for long, because it turns out someone Spider calls him again. Spider goes to an address. The parties unknown inject him with some sort of green goop, and it shatters the blood bond to Squizzy. Hope's eyes glimmer as she leans forwards. She stares at everyone present, each one at a time, in turn. Then, she carefully pushes the cup of Turkish blend away from her and smiles. It's Specs. Specs is the mastermind. He's running a multi-level conspiracy, and everyone thinks they're a knight or a queen when they're all pawns. Us included. We've got inklings that most of us were embraced that night and put in that meat locker and set free at that time because, well, I don't know. But maybe because he had the premonition that we'd be useful. I don't know who else is still a pawn in this, but the problem we have is that whatever his endgame, the fucker deals with loose ends one by one, getting rid of his own pieces to cover his tracks. Tea spews out of Chimera's nose. A loud snort splashes all over the table. This is her first time seeing 4D chess in action. It's far beyond anything that Gangrel would ever think to do, and she's actively impressed and terrified that all this time the coterie has been dancing to someone's tune. Hope passes her a napkin. Yeah, I know, right? Can't say that's unsurprising. Derek's voice answers from the doorway. Apologies for the lateness. Parking was hell. Oh, Come on in, man. Good to see you. Hope gives Derek a hug. At this point, Hope rolls a charisma persuade check. Ediz and Aaliyah look on with great interest. They've said nothing yet, but as Derek takes his seat, the coterie notices both of them exchange a furtive glance. Derek vaguely smells of smoke, and there's a black scorch mark on the back of his trench coat. But he also looks far closer to his old self than the cold, dead thing he was after the diablerie. He's happy to be around the coterie again. That he has enough humanity left in him to appreciate his friends. You might be wondering why I'm taking the risk of telling you this, Hope says, surveying Aaliyah and Ediz. She rolls 4 successes. Hope's face softens as she reaches out to sense the beast. He feels Derek a lot cooler to the feel than he was a week or so ago. As Derek reaches for a cup of tea, 2 more figures step through the doorway to the stairwell. It's Emily and the recently deflowered Slick. I told them you were organising another party, and of course Emily wanted in, and Slick assumed there would actually be pizza, Derek says with a smile. There is, Hope smiles. You got a phone? Domino's delivers. You should have heard me arguing with the restaurant owner when I told him that some Uber Eats drivers might show up with a stack of Domino's at some point tonight. Just tell the waiter when you're ready and he'll understand. He'll even bring it out for you. Aaliyah holds out a hand to Derek. And you are the one we have to thank for getting the cure very soon, I understand. After Derek has shaken her hand and gotten comfortable at the table, Aaliyah and Ediz exchange another furtive glance. Finally, Aaliyah nods. Ediz smiles and turns to face Hope. When Aaliyah began her bid for a spot on the Primogen Council, she dug up every piece of info she could on the major players in the court. Hope leans forwards, and so does Derek, visibly intrigued. That's when we turned this up. It's a couple decades old, but it's unmistakable. Don't ask me where I got it from. Me and him used to be partners, in a sense. Did a bit of recon up in G-Town a few years ago. That's what got me the sheriff position, and it got him, well... Dees reaches into his pocket, retrieving a rectangle piece of plastic. We decided to sit on it, least of all until we were sure there was an actual threat. He places the plastic face down on the table and slides it over to Hope. Biting her bottom lip, feeling the tension bearing down upon her, she places her thumb on the edge of the plastic card and flips it over. Secret Intelligence Service, Australian Government. Employee ID number 10260528009X. Status: active field agent. Smith Zachariah. Specs, Hope says. It's unmistakably him. He hasn't aged a single day since the picture on the card was taken. Hope flips it over again and takes a look at the date on the back. Expiry: the 5th, 2003. Hope's head hits the back of the chair with a thump. So yeah, that's why I'm concerned that you two aren't gonna land Primogen seats, because the endgame of this conspiracy isn't in Squizzy's court. He thinks it is. It's not. There's just one thing we haven't managed to figure out, says Ediz. We have no idea where his haven is. We've been looking for years. So, what is the end goal? Asks Aaliyah. If the seneschal is the puppet master, what does he hope to achieve? Nobody would back him as prince. He doesn't want prince, my lady. He doesn't want any kindred here. He wants a clean sweep. He wants a Brisbane. He's the one who told Father Patrick to get clear. He's the one who set up Martin since his own infiltration and worked out so well. Light dawns in Hope's brain. She rubs her face. cradling it in her palm. God damn it. He aims to wipe us all out. And every kindred on every layer of this conspiracy, and I'm sure there must be anarchs in on it too, thinks he's going after something smaller. Well, he's a Malkavian, ponders Ediz. Who can even guess at his motives? Probably thinks he's still a secret agent busting terrorists in the desert somewhere. Hope nods in agreement. For all I know, he thinks he's still alive and fooling all us blank bodies. But he's no less dangerous for it. I'm pretty sure he wants us all dead. But yeah, there may be other motives in play here. I can't say 100%. So, stir up as much chaos in the city as you can, put the court in disarray, and then strike. Is that his plan? Asks Ediz, his voice tinged with anger. Seems like it. And isn't it funny that the Second Inquisition is bringing all their forces into Melbourne now? This is how I know he's running off premonitions. That, and probably a combo of Martin doing wiretapping, spying through tech, and whatever agents he has entrenched in the domain. He needed someone else to handle that end of things, so backing him up on it, I imagine. That's how Martin fits in. Then that means Operation Unicorn was not the coup de grace after all, says Aaliyah, frowning. Something bigger is still in store. Hope sighs, refilling her cup with Turkish blend. Pretty sure it'll happen after we take down Thornton, but I'm not sure how to start digging on that. We'll probably have to get a game plan going after Thornton. All of us. Hope looks around the room. We're in this deep. Even if his goal isn't genocide, we've seen how he deals with loose ends. That is almost certainly a wise idea, agrees Aaliyah. The pertinent question is, do we proceed as originally planned, feign ignorance and dispose of Thornton as ordered? Chimera suddenly stands up. She stares towards the exit of the room, her eyes wide, anxious. I've got to tell Thomas about this. He'd be able to get the Baron to play it safe until this blows over, or maybe with enough convincing we could even get her to come in as backup if the Inquisition tries to level us all. Thomas, Hope says. We don't know if Specs has his hooks into Baron Sue. I think Thomas Roth would be the better choice. I'm damn sure he wouldn't be in on this sort of stuff. I have no objection to alerting some anarchs if they are trustworthy, says Aaliyah. If there is to be a war with the Second Inquisition, then we will need bodies in the streets. Chimera chews her cheek. Look, I hope the camp burns to the ground, but that doesn't mean I want the people in it to. God, the anarchs wouldn't want that either. I'm sure of it. This is bigger than the cam, though. We've got to at least try to get them to see that this is important. Agreed, says Hope. My problems with the Camarilla are ideological and best served with debate and negotiation. This is a both sides problem. Chimera levels her gaze to Aaliyah once again. All of us are going to be in danger here. This isn't about alliances anymore. Damn it! Ediz suddenly shouts, slamming his fist on the table. A waiter pokes his head out from the kitchen, asking if everything's okay. Aaliyah waves him off, and then Ediz takes a deep breath. Ediz? That Fed on the news the other night, the one who said he's going after the people who destroyed the factory? Warren Fox, I think? Martin said there's going to be agents in the street, checkpoints on every corner. That was the plan. He knew you'd destroy that factory, and now they'll have all the clearance they'll ever need to move in. Yup. And it didn't matter that we left no solid evidence at the scene, because they have specs on the inside to tell them who to look for. I'm betting that's how they plan to tie up our loose end. Maybe a whole lot more. We bring in Thornton, and that's it. We're the last ones left. Daylight raids on our havens. If Hope had a heart, if Derek had a heart, if Vince had a heart, they would all be beating 1,000,000 times a second. Everyone's minds flash back to just about a year ago when they were called to present themselves to the prince for the first time. Specs knows where their havens are. We're safe until Thornton's brought in, I think, says Hope. not looking quite sure of herself. After that, all bets are off. In a mixture of rage and fear, Chimera kicks out with her combat boot, sending her chair clattering mercilessly to the floor. How are we going to find somewhere safe with cops on every corner, surveillance at maximum, and specs watching our every move? You can't be everywhere, Hope says. And the closer to the script we play it, the more chance we have to quietly set things up to pop his trap and be out of it when it hits. If we can find out when it's gonna hit, we can arrange matters to be elsewhere when the hammer comes down and strike back hard. Ediz and Aaliyah can mask so they can go off grid and make sure they're not in a usual haven when shit happens. That might do it. Though there could be premonitions in play, so it's hard to say. What if, Ediz pipes up, what if we say fuck it and just hit the fucker now? Oof. Hit him now? Hope bites her bottom lip. I think I know the answer to this, but we can run a premonition if you want, and the answer I'm thinking is that everyone in the conspiracy thinks we're acting against the conspiracy and comes to his rescue. And even if we win, the surviving members of the conspiracy nail our asses to the wall for assassinating the seneschal. All the evidence is piecemeal, circumstantial. And even if we survive that, the Second Inquisition goes, whoops, our agent's burned, time to bring the hammer down. Correct, says Aaliyah, her lips so thin as to no longer be visible. If we are to have any chance against him, we must wait for him to play his hand first. Martin is likely keeping him appraised of the prince's movements, which means... Aaliyah trails off. So, here's a question, Hope says, cutting through the tense silence. I'm pretty sure the prince is on the chopping block, probably gonna be one of the first casualties, so do we care? This is a question for everyone. Good riddance, says Aaliyah. Let his final death serve as the signal to put our own plans into motion. Vince shuffles in his chair. How to put this delicately? I am not without investment in Squizzy's continued existence. Probably not like that. That is to say, who would become prince if he's gone? That's a risky power vacuum. That is a pretty big question, agrees Hope. Turns out, and Vince isn't sure why this occurs to him, but it's much harder to speak manipulatively when you're talking to your friends. Maybe they're growing on him after all. Look, Squiz is a fucking lump, but he's predictable and evidently controllable. Hope nods. These are good points. Don't know if they're enough to make him worth saving, though. My gut says no, but I'm not the only one in this room. I mean, Thornton and Cypher basically set him up as their hand puppet while they consolidated power for their own pushes, and that let Specs sneak in and work his wiles. Vince sighs, rubs his temples. It's an old habit from his breathing days. Why am I trying to act coy? I think I could do a lot on the council. His face sours, assuming he's sincere about that and not just planning to ice me. Well, here's the thing. The council doesn't need the prince to exist. Hope grins. But that equation might change if a new prince comes in and has the sway to wipe the council. I don't know exactly how that works. Yeah, I'm not sure the rest of the council would have my back, says Vince. Oops. A little too vulnerable there. He didn't mean to admit that. His face hardens. Slimy fucks, he says, almost spitting into his tea. Much better. Well, she will, Hope nods to Aaliyah. And Cypher, well, Hope glances at Derek. Gonna be an interesting night soon. Maria, I'm thinking, is gonna be happy to work with people who aren't blackmailing her, especially if we can help avenge Jackie. We probably want to add a few more Primogen down the road. Lots of clans need representation. Vince is still for a moment, watching steam rise from the tea he's not drinking. Yeah, alright, can work with that. The pronoun unspoken, we. But he looks up, looking a little more confident again. What about Sue? That is a big question, Hope frowns. I don't know if Specs has pulled her into the conspiracy or not, He's definitely using her as a catalyst to push Squizzy into the firing line, but I'm not sure if she's dancing to his tune. Hey, Derek, do you think it's worth a premonition to find out? Regardless, she's pretty canny. She's got enough anarchs liking her that I think she'll survive. So there's stuff we need to think about where she's concerned. I'm wondering if the city needs a prince at all. I'm wondering if the Camarilla could just get by with a Primogen council, in which case she could probably politic with Maria to take the Toreador spot, and Roth could land the Gangrel spot if he cared enough about it, or, like Aaliyah said, she could leave the Baron behind and take the reins of princedom, in which case she'd be coming in as a returning anarch, so she'd probably want to leave the Primogen council in place, but, she probably wouldn't view you as a threat, particularly since we've helped both sides for the good of the city. Vince scoffs. No way the council would go for more than a year without someone making a bid for practice. Hell, I'd be tempted. And you know, if I were trying to pull a spec, someone like Maria would be my first bet to manipulate into making a Doom ploy for power. Then you've got chaos again. This city needs stability. Vincent adjusts his collar. This is where I tell you something. Sue's sweet on me. He glances at Chimera. If he was alive, he'd be blushing. Politically, I mean, she's smart. I think she saw the writing on the wall before the cam did. If her word is to be trusted, I have her support. Hope nods reluctantly. Yeah, you're right, man. The city's too big and too tempting, isn't it? I'd like to try out a princeless council thing, but shoot, it wouldn't last, would it? Her eyes stray towards Ediz and Aaliyah and the rest of the coterie, and Slick, who's currently stuffing his face with dominoes. Dominoes that he must have acquired, while everyone was deep in discussion about the conspiracy. That gets a smile. Oh, that's the question, isn't it? Says Chimera. Who to put at the top? My first instinct is an anarch, of course, like the Baron. She'd run this city right. She's done more for the anarchs than anyone ever has, and I feel good about her allegiances. You've seen the company she keeps. This city doesn't need an iron fist. It needs a hand that cares, and a motivation that can be seen by everyone around. You know that's none of us. Closest of us is Aaliyah, but she seems more of a Shadows type. No offense? Chimera shakes her head. No, the Baron is the only choice, with a shake-up of most of the Primogen. Cut off the head of the snake and the body dies. Replace it with a different animal. Chimera isn't sure how this is intended to be received. The idea of keeping the cam a functional system is appalling to it, but it's clear that the rest want to keep it running with someone else at the wheel. It better be an anarch unless... Why not throw in with the anarchs? He finally says. Why keep the system at all? It clearly doesn't work. You said it yourself. One slip, and we've got this again. Whoa, Hope nods at Chimera. Still water's running deep. Chimera looks blankly at Hope. Just because I like to break things doesn't mean I don't think sometimes. Sometimes. Whoops. Bit of a cell phone there, Chimera thinks. But that's not new. She'll go break a window later to feel better about that. Nobody ever said you didn't have a brain in there, Hope pats her arm. Just that you tend to reflect a lot before you speak. It's pretty cool. As to why not throw in with the Anarchs, one of my best friends so far is among the Toreador. He's an Ancilla, and he mentioned once that he has a lot of sympathy, but he's too old to learn new tricks. That goes for a lot of the Camarilla in town. Being an Anarch is more work and less security, and a lot of them feel that way. The Anarchs don't have the numbers that the Camarilla does. Best we can hope for is coexistence, barring a major extinction event, which I don't want to see because I do have friends on all sides here. And it just kind of works. Some people work better with structure and oversight and are willing to pay with their allegiance. Others do better at being their own boss. That, and I get the feeling that without the Camarilla to have as a rival, the local scene would turn on each other and squabble until the Camarilla from somewhere else gets its shit together and comes in to take over. Chimera's arms flick to a tight cross and her outfit squeaks in protest. Hope's right. She admits that, and that pisses her off. You're really smart, you know that? She grinds her teeth for a moment, digesting the idea of keeping the cam around. but in name only, in a more cooperative capacity. Stranger things have happened and worked, but I think you underestimate us, though there's definitely some truth to what you're saying. We don't have the numbers to run the whole city. Yet. If we can somehow stack the cards right to have the cam happy enough to work alongside us, that could work to keep stability. Plus, she thinks, keeping her thoughts to herself, having the Baron at the top means that there's always room for expansion in the future. Hope lifts her hand. Sorry. Hey, and thanks. I guess I'm smart. I kind of fell into the strategist role for us. Hope's still getting used to praise. Might be a small kink in her psyche there. Between Aaliyah and Ediz's words and now this, there's a definite blush going on in her cheeks. I'm thinking that at this point the priority's got to be ejecting specs and making sure the Second Inquisition gets a bloody enough nose that they're set back a decade or two, and that Sue's the best compromise candidate for both sides. I mean, I've heard her shout, "No more princes," and I believe she means it, but now there's a part of her that knows she could step up and do the job. That said, please do talk to your sire about all of this. He's going to have to deal with the aftermath regardless of how this goes. He's done right enough by all of us that he deserves a square deal. Chimera happily takes her hand and smiles. It's a little goofy, but it's not often words strike true from her own mouth. The stars will not align again for many moons to come. Well, I'm looking forward to throwing specs out into the sunlight at least. I'll contact Thomas as soon as we're done here and see if he can't get us all a seat at the rant. He can speak with the Baron herself. Taking a sip of tea, still noticeably pale, Derek looks contemplative for a moment before speaking, for nearly the first time since he arrived. Or maybe we should consider a prince who is okay with the idea of a council instead. I get the feeling we all agree there needs to be more primogen, so if the new prince is willing to be a voice for the council instead of the head honcho, we avoid the risk of a power vacuum and hopefully it'll temper people's race for praxis. Of course, this could all just be a wishful thinking. He takes another sip. Elders. Hope purses her lips. We'd need an elder in a position of power to tie everyone together. Maybe that goes for the Primogen too. Are there any Tremere or Ventru elders here? Hope gets up to fetch more tea, Turkish blend for Chimera, and black for herself. She hands the pot to Chimera. Chimera graciously accepts it. Thanks, hun. Prefer something a mite stronger than tea, but this is pretty good shit. If you're talking alcohol, cautions Hope, don't have any. But there's this treacle-based tea that's got some seriously weird spices in it. Look, don't get me wrong, says Derek. I understand that there will always be someone gunning for control. That's just the world we live in. Ideally, I prefer a new system that was a middle ground between the Cam and the Anarchs. Might be we could make some adjustments, and regardless of how we go about it, Anarchs are going to stay Anarchs, and the Camarilla are going to remain the Cam. There seems to be some room for adjustments within the franchise, so to speak. Maybe we make it so that the prince isn't the one who appoints the Primogen. Maybe the clans get to choose who represent them. What? Says Chimera, taking a sip of the black tea. Get all democratic? I mean, some will. Like the Bruja will probably try to do that. The Banu Hakim will probably look at Aaliyah and do what she wants. The Ventru are going to politic about it. The Gangrel can, I don't know, go settle things in an old Tali's parking lot. Hope grins to show that she's teasing. There's a taste of bile creeping up, slowly tingling Chimera's mouth. All this talk of power struggles and leaders is strangely sickening. It'll just end up the way it was at that point. If not everyone plays by the rules, it'll all go down exactly the same again. Try to defang a system that's based entirely on having power means that you have anarchs. Trying to shift the power means you have people vying for it at all times. It's insane. Her chair suffers another point of aggravated damage. You might as well just let it crumble to the dust at that point. It's like dysfunctional anarchy if everyone doesn't play along properly. Tuft of hair on her head gets scruffled and ruffled out of shape again. She breathes and calms herself. Okay, It's no secret I disagree with the entire stupid thing the Cam do. And I'm trying to play along here, but you're all trying to prop up something that doesn't work. It makes you look weak. You know as well as I do that the Ventru will keep trying to rule everyone, the Banner Hakim will do the bidding required and step on what needs to be stepped on, and the Gangrel will bite each other until they're happy. How does that make for a democratic system or a power hierarchy that makes any goddamn sense? Even I agree, you have to have a leader. Okay, says Hope, shrugging. You and Vince have convinced me. Oh, really? Says Chimera. She blushes and recovers her chair, sitting down quietly. Hope rubs her face. We aren't going to solve everything today. Lord knows that no plan survives first contact with people. But yeah, let's change topics. So, Thornton and Palmer. I've got intel on Thornton and Aaliyah has something on Palmer. Long story short is that Thornton is gathering all the Ventru to do something for him, like perform a sensitive task or guard some location. At least according to my friend in the Toreador. They're getting highly pissed because they don't have time for this bullshit and it's cutting into their personal business. Tiny clattering cuts through Hope's summary of events as Chimera stirs her tea meekly with a spoon. Anything else you've noticed? Are they spending lots of time checking one spot or moving any stuff or anything? Knowing the Ventru, they'd be delegating, keeping it nice and tidy though. As I said, I got this from my Toreador contact. Mainly he knows that this is going on because they've been stressed out at Elysium and griping about Thornton. So I don't have any specific locations or firmer intel than that, but honestly, she looks at Ediz. Knowing that most of the Ventru are working on this, I'm hoping you can go and track down the crowd and figure out what's happening there. Aaliyah and Ediz have been listening to the coterie's discussion patiently, occasionally nodding or exchanging a glance in between sips of tea. Opposite them, Emily and Slick have sat in silence, well aware of the company they're keeping tonight. Slick's even trying hard not to make a mess as he scarfs down his barbecue chicken pizza, in quotation marks. At one point, the waiter arrives at the table to refill a pot of tea, glaring at Slick and his box of dominoes with obvious distaste. I'm aware of some domains that have attempted to govern by council alone, says Aaliyah thoughtfully. It has never lasted more than a handful of decades. Our kind are greedy and ruthless and not to be trusted. Any kindred influential enough to speak for their entire clan could not be blamed for eventually attempting to rise above their station. Mr. Merriweather, despite his youth, understands the nature of kindred who politic and backstab. She takes a sip of her tea, emptying the last dregs from her cup. However, it is typical of many domains to have a representative on the Primogen Council for each clan. There are enough of them that they act as checks and balances to the prince and to each other. This only works, however, if whoever holds praxis over the domain is strong-willed and influential enough in their own right to maintain the status quo, to prevent any single member of the council from overreaching. Chimera is correct in this case. Tien Su has managed to unite the Anarchs and maintain their loyalty to her for quite some time. Perhaps not all of them, if the Northcott Push are a typical example, but enough to prove that she can lead. It is apparent to me that this domain, despite its size, however, has a noticeable lack of elders or other kindred of significant age. Many of them were likely run out of the city after Prince Lytton's praxis was ended, or they have left, called by the beckoning. Tien Su is one of a very small minority, a status shared by only a few others. Thornton Adams, as you know, Professor Cypher, as you could expect, the old Bruja Sheriff Conrad Schrecht, though he is autarchus in these nights and rarely seen. Sebastian Wilde, the head Setite among the Anarchs, though he has ties to Prince Saracen of Sydney. And finally, myself. As she reaches for the jug in the center of the table to refill her cup, Dees reaches for Slick's Domino's box, extracting a slice. Slick loudly protests. Let's see what the fuzz is about, Ediz says, brushing Slick's hand away, rolling up the slice and pushing it into his mouth. He chews in silence for a few moments, then swallows and shakes his head. Oh, that's fucking foul, my friend. There are other elders, but they're not necessarily within reach, he continues, grabbing a pot of tea and quickly pouring a cup. taking several sips from it to wash out the taste of the pizza. Another child of Prince Lytton's. Baron Sue's older broodmate is the prince up in G-Town. There's Squizzy's sire, Red Meg, as well. She's probably the oldest kindred on the continent, if you believe the rumours. 7th gen Bruja, embraced on the streets of medieval London. She's been AWOL for a long time, though. Some reckon Squizzy killed her, but never believed that. And there was a Nagaraja from Tasmania making moves around the time of the gold rush. No clue where he is now, probably dead or in torpor somewhere. As he trails off, possibly contemplating a city with a Nagaraja prince, Aaliyah clears her throat, as if preparing for a speech. If Tian Su was installed as the figurehead in charge of this domain, she says, then we would have essentially established an anarch state. Su's responsibility would be to ensure that the masquerade remains unbreached and to adjudicate on decisions affecting the domain at large. But aside from that, each clan would be left to govern itself according to the primogen's desires. Some kindred may even elect to opt out of the system entirely. As long as they respect the masquerade, that is unlikely to be a concern for Su. Obviously, my preference would be for the Camarilla to remain intact, but reformed. To that end, she leans forwards, I would like for you to consider me as a candidate for praxis. There's silence around the table. Remains for several moments as Aaliyah's words hang on the air and the coterie reflect on the implication of Aaliyah as prince. Finally, the sound is broken by Derek taking a loud sip of his tea. I agree we probably want someone of the same generation as Prince, otherwise it could incentivize other kindred of lower generations to try for praxis. The silence broken, Hope reaches forwards, takes a square of dominoes from Slick's box. He protests once again and chews it thoughtfully. It's kind of got what my mom used to call White Castle factor. It's in life you have it usually when nothing else is available or with a bunch of friends who enjoy the hell out of it. The taste is distinctive, so the memories bring you back, and it's cheap and fast to get. So, yeah, bad pizza, but good times. She listens to the spiel, eyes wide. Okay, it's a small pond for elders, at least the publicly known ones. Makes sense in a way, hard to get to, big stretches of empty lupines. Holy God, the lupines. Question, Nagaraja? I don't know that word. Another clan, I'm assuming? Ediz shrugs. Don't worry about that. Technically, they'd be called Hecata these nights, but there aren't any in Melbourne anyway, as far as I know. Squizzy made sure of that. Didn't want anyone else locking down the organised crime racket. Okay, I'll file that on stuff to look up later. Hope considers Aaliyah as she chases the dominoes down with her tea. Thing is, says Ediz, the main goal here is to ensure that whoever steps up as primogen is on equal footing, so they all keep each other in check. And failing that, if all the primogen can't be equals in terms of power, then there needs to be a strong figurehead to unite them. He jabs a thumb at his sire, sitting behind him. She nods imperiously. You are cunning and wise, Hope says, and the fact I'm not a pile of grimy bones speaks to your mercy, and you're gracious enough to take tea with a group of neonates, fledglings, and thin bloods. These are all good qualities in my eyes. That said, if you're asking for support for praxis, there's much to discuss. Now, continues Ediz, I think Vince and Derek have the potency to make up for their lack of age. You're both 12th gen, and that's uncommon in these nights. Wouldn't buy you much influence across the pond, but here, that's a legitimate bump in power. I could see either of you filling the spot as primogen of your clans, but you'd need to justify why you're a better choice than an ancilla who at least has age and experience under their belt. I'm well aware of this, says Derek. Certainly adds a wrinkle to things. Aaliyah peers at Hope. Her eyes suddenly narrow and something imperceptible shifts in her face. For just a moment, the coterie is getting a glimpse of the ruthlessness that she keeps hidden, just under her veneer of cunning wisdom. And what would you like to discuss? Well, before we get into that, you mentioned you had information about Palmer. Maybe we hear that before we start the haggling. Hope smiles. That's a fair point, says Derek. That's why we're here after all. Aaliyah shrugs. She glances at Ediz, who retrieves a manila folder from a bag at his feet. He places it on the table and flips it open. The first things the coterie see inside are grainy photographs of Palmer and Thornton. Lance Corporal Elliot Palmer, says Ediz, reading from a sheet of paper. Victorian Cross recipient for bravery beyond the call of duty in the African theatre of World War II. After being discharged from the army in 1944, he founded a security firm, Palmer Solutions, which later became a subsidiary of Thornton's company. It was embraced in 1949 at Thornton's direct request. Ventrue clan needed a solid enforcer for when negotiation didn't work. Palmer's very good at what he does. He's an expert sniper, trained in wilderness survival, and has mastered fortitude. Hope whistles. Wow, Vince, you're cited as an action movie hero. Well, more like villain. Ediz continues on. Thornton Adams, embraced circa 1840. Couldn't find much about his sire, but from what I understand, he was some kind of industrialist in Manchester who sent Thornton out to the colonies to suss out opportunities for making money. He was only a neonate when he arrived in Melbourne, but he quickly found a niche for himself exporting products and merchandise from England, supplying the growing needs of a developing city. Eventually, when the 20th century rolled around, he extended his influence into department stores, established himself as a kind of merchant prince in the 1920s. That's how he made his fortune as an anciller. All of that money went into Adams Investments, which you're all familiar with. They provide operating capital for startups and deal in stocks. That's how he's been able to consolidate his hold over the city's finances and the other Ventrue. Ediz finishes, slamming the folder shut. Hope drums her fingers on the table as she looks back to Aaliyah. Okay, that should make investigation easier, but we have things to discuss. Look, I'm thinking we're going to need a coterie huddle to talk about your praxis. I honestly didn't expect this to come up tonight, and I think we need to do a check with everyone, see what our thoughts and feelings are before we sit down and start bargaining and making promises. So, there's a smoking area on the roof. You and Ediz could wait here, and we could go up there and talk this over. What does everyone think? What do you think? Does that sound fair? Aaliyah nods. Without saying anything, she gestures towards the metal door leading to the stairwell. I'll text you when we're done, Ediz. Thank you for both understanding. Hope rises from her chair. As she leads the coterie to the stairwell, she lets out a whistle. Holy fuck nuggets with a side order of well sauce. This is not what I expected to be talking over tonight. Thoughts? And you guys can give me your thoughts too, she says, glancing over to Emily and Slick as she pushes open the metal door at the top of the stairs, stepping out into the cold night. Slick shrugs and says something, but his mouth is full of pizza. Emily rolls her eyes and translates for him. We don't especially care who you pick, but the thin bloods have to get a seat at the table. If Squizzy is ousted, and whoever comes in continues treating us like dog shit, whatever goodwill you've earned with us will drain away quickly. I agree with that 100%, Hope nods, leaning against an AC unit. The stuff you guys go through is fucking barbaric. It's on Kindred Society to do better. Both thin bloods nod eagerly. So, if we do decide that she's our pick, then that'll be our negotiating point number one. No, actually, not negotiating point, make it a fucking requirement, non-negotiable. Don't know if we can talk her into a primogen spot, but at the very least, equal rights ought to be doable. Agreed, says Derek, taking a seat on the small, waist-high brick wall that circles the edge of the rooftop. Unless either of you think you could handle a primogen spot, I'd been thinking of having a word with your speaker friends in the Anarchs, and regarding Aaliyah, currently, I can't say I'd 100% back her. I get that secrecy and lurking in the shadows is the Banu Hakim thing, but it doesn't help with gaining trust. Emily shrugs. If not a primogen spot, then we need one of the members of the council to be in our corner, as if we were part of their clan. Hope nods, agreeing wholeheartedly. Part of this coterie huddle is to check to see if anyone's got absolute feelings on it. If that's the case, we need to know now. But if the feelings aren't absolute, there's room for negotiation and bargaining. That'll be for after the huddle. I'm not 100% sold either, but I could be. I've seen how Baron Sue goes. That's one of the big worries on my mind was, what if she was just using her barony as a stepping stone to Praxis? But everyone's got a say in this. Firm, ambitious leader's the best option, says Chimera, stamping her combat boots on the concrete roof. I hate to admit it, but Aaliyah is definitely the best in-house pick. That being said, having someone rule from the shadows with manipulation, fear, and a boot on rebellious necks isn't exactly my idea of a good society. Between you and me, I wouldn't put it past the Banu Hakim to ensure dissenting voices are hushed. You already know where my allegiances lie, and what I think is best. Hope nods at Chimera. Yeah, that's definitely something we'll have to bring up with her. She's gonna have to do public stuff if she wants the throne. Not just her, says Chimera. Her whole clan. There will be a nightlight on in every shadowy corner the Banu Hakim hide in, if she's the prince. Alright? She's gonna have to be a fuckload more social. The big thing is no ruling by fear, is what I'm getting from this. Yeah? That's more or less my point, says Chimera, giving a shrug. I trust her and Ediz, but I don't think the rest of them will enjoy the public life. You know when someone really famous and really incorrect for public office gets a shot, and it turns into a reality TV show? I assume that's the Banu Hakim's greatest fear as a collective, and it's exactly what will happen, regardless of Aaliyah herself. The last thing they want is the spotlight. Yeah, says Hope. But there's not a lot of those guys from what I can recall. Don't remember how many, but it's barely like double digits. So she would need help from the other clans. Or us, the surprisingly badass baby coterie. Chuckle sneaks out of Chimera's lips. Yeah, what's with that? Is there some kind of secret sauce going on here with our disciplines or something? I'm going to try hard not to think that our successes are the result of being well-placed pawns entirely, even if that's a little bit of the cocktail. But we get shit done. Ah, Hope smiles. Thanks, Chim. Yeah, I don't know how we're doing it, but it's working so far. I won't deny that I have some serious imposter syndrome going sometimes. As she says this, she tries her hardest to suppress the thought that all of the coterie's successes have been part of Spex's plan. So far, backing each other up seems to be working out. Make friends, do your damnedest to make sure they prosper, that's my guess. Well, it's not all up to you or me. Even the coterie, for that matter. At the end of it all. Vince, Derek, how do you feel about all this? Hope glances over to Vince. Yeah, you okay with Aaliyah being your boss, or Primogen-to-be? Or is that a hard pass? Derek said he's already not opposed, but take a bunch of discussion. I barely know a thing about her. How could I answer that? Vince exhales, long and smooth, subconsciously mimicking the patterns of smoking. Blame Pavlov for that. Why are you guys so hot on her anyway? Well, I mean, says Slick, choosing his words carefully through a mouthful of dominoes. She's a hot female assassin. It's like one of my animes. Slick, I swear to God I will turn you back into a flower, says Chimera. Oh, just for that, says Vince, my vote goes to Sue. I'll help turn him into a flower, says Emily. Says Slick, swallowing the mush he's chewing on. Baron Sue in those jeans. Emily rolls her eyes, folds her arms. Hope, you didn't happen to ask your sire how the whole flower thing works, did you? Vincent's eyes flash white. He looks straight into Slick's face. Commanding, he says, Slick, I'd like you to go eat your pizza over there. He gestures to the stairwell. Slick stands, picks up his Domino's box, and without saying anything, steps through the doorway. Good boy, says Vince. Now where were we? He addresses the group. Pros and cons. Aaliyah versus Sue. Shoot. Then taking the seat on the edge of the roof, high above the cattle and chaos down below, he thinks about smoking. Could really go for a smoke right now. Well, as for Sue, says Chimera, she's ex-cam and has the blood and experience to run the show. Proven herself keeping the Anarchs together, thriving even, and would be a beacon for those around. She peers at Vincent. He's staring down into the streets below. It's odd to see Vincent almost enjoying the sights, Chimera thinks. It's kind of cute. Aaliyah, though, she's already cam. It would be much easier to argue her case for the job, plus she'd make sure her clan keeps us in one piece for a time. Can't forget that it would cause the least stir and instability in the court. At least I think so. But on the flip side, the Baron would make the environment much more hospitable to everyone, thin-blooded, Anarch and Cam, equally. All good points, Vince says, with a practiced, ponderous gaze into the middle distance. Nah, but I think we need to get a divination going. Hope looks around to make sure they're alone on the roof and no cameras are about. Derek, can I ask you to run a premonition on Sue? I can summon some birds to replenish if it makes you hungry. We've got a mixed coterie here. Cam, an Anarch, and Thin Blood. We need to see how on life is going to be if Sue takes the throne. And then maybe run one for Aaliyah. Compare and contrast. See which one's the best ending for this run. She chuckles. I could try. Don't know if I can see that far ahead, says Derek. But he takes a moment, closes his eyes, and focuses on Sue as Prince to see if the premonition comes to him. Finally, the blood stirs. And Derek pierces the veil. 4 large crows descend from the cloudy night sky and perch on the edge of the roof. It took them a while to get here, Hope thinks. Far longer than usual. Hopefully that's not a bad omen. The 4 doomed birds stare groggily at Hope with bleary eyes, their feathers dishevelled. 2 of them are down Hope's gullet before they have a chance to blink. She pauses and coughs out feathers. Sorry, I was pretty hungry. 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for a girl, and 4 for a boy. She gestures, and the other 2 flap over to land on Derek's shoulders. The 2 remaining birds think they're off the hook. They stare at Derek with curiosity. Their mistake. As he feels the stirrings of his vision begin to emerge in his mind, he reaches out for the feathered vermin. The bloodless carcasses go in Hope's ever-present purse for disposal later. To Derek, animal blood was never exactly nice, especially the animals Hope summons, which usually taste of inner-city pollution. But now, with Alexander's more potent vitae running through his veins, it's almost like he's drizzling toilet water down his throat. The beast scoffs. The 2 birds barely sate the hunger pangs. Nonetheless, there's just enough nourishment in their thin, watery blood to finally spur Derek's 6th sense fully into action. As he opens his mouth to express his disgust at what he just consumed, a vision flashes through his mind. The Great Hall of the National Gallery, the stained glass roof showering hundreds of kindred in multicoloured light. There's barely any room to move within the vast area. There's groups of vampires ebb and flow through it. A constant hum of voices, deals being negotiated, gossip being traded, veiled insults being slung, fills Derek's ears. It's Elysium writ large. Suddenly, the din is replaced with silence. The hundreds of kindred turn in unison to face the back of the hall. There, emerging from one of the adjacent galleries, is Baron Sue, dressed in a beautiful golden dress, her presence casting her in the light of a mortal queen. 10 figures follow her in a procession. Hope, Vince, and Derek among them. As the Baron commands the attention of the court, the 10 Primogen take their places, standing in a semicircle around her. "Let's get down to business," says Baron Sue, extending her left hand in invitation. Instantly, the din of voices roars up again, hundreds of vampires shouting their demands to the Baron. "Silence! One at a time!" roars one of the Primogen, the burly countenance of Thomas Roth almost unrecognisable in an ill-fitting dinner suit. Some of the voices pipe down, while others roar louder. "Gangrel fledglings keep poaching in my domain, and I demand a stop to it," shouts a blonde-haired Ventru, her silver gown billowing with anger. "They don't even attempt to clean up their mess. The masquerade is paper-thin in the suburbs." Hearing this, Vince steps forwards, ignoring the continued buzz of the crowd. He bows before Baron Sue and smiles. "There is some concern from the Ventru clan that the expansion of the gangrel is problematic to our interests, my Baron." Thomas Roth scoffs, brushing a hand in the air. "The Ventru could do with some downsizing. A large chunk of our territory now belongs to the Duskborn, as was agreed upon. Where else are our fledglings supposed to go?" His comment sets off the other Primogen. They all raise their voices in protest. The vision ends, and Derek is once again on the roof of the Turkish restaurant. "What do your elven eyes see?" Hope jokes. There's tension in her words. Wasn't sure that'd work," she says, as Derek recounts what he saw. "Okay," Hope thinks. "Sounds like business as usual, but more inclusive. Feel up to trying for a compare and contrast with Aaliyah in charge?" Chimera does a little fist pump. "I'm a little confused about you other 3 all being by her side, and that possibility. Are you all Primogen somehow, or just advisors of some kind? If you were 3 of 10, then I guess that means... you are. Yeah. Didn't expect you to go for it, Hope. Guess Sue would want Zamiti to represent your clan. I don't know of any others that would fit. Or any others in the city at all." Hope makes a face, quickly doing the math in her head. 10 advisors. Banu Hakim, Bruja, Gangrel, Octavian, Ministry, Toreador, Tremere, Zemis, and Ventru. That makes 10. Which means the Kaitif and the Thin Bloods have no direct representative. "But they do have territory," Hope says aloud. "Probably have me or you or me or Derek representing them, or both. Most likely a part of whatever agreement we made with her." Derek nods. Except, Hope thinks, something else doesn't add up. The Nosferatu don't fit in there either. "I want to help out," says Chimera, "but I'm not sure if government work is really my thing. I'm already becoming an elder just having this pizza party. That's the road we go down. We've got to make sure the Baron doesn't forget the Thin Bloods. Even if we can't convince her that the vision is real or trustworthy, she'll see reason if we talk about the population boom." "Hey, Derek. Remember seeing any Nosferatu anywhere in your vision? Even in the crowds at Elysium? Doesn't seem to me like they fit into this." "Lysandra are out too," says Hope, "so no Sylvia." "If you weren't there, that's troublesome, Chimera." "You said that no plan survives first contact with the enemy. Maybe this is all we can muster in the first sweep to get anything going that isn't Squizzy and the Goof Troop," Chimera says, her fingers crossed behind her back. "Roth was there, though," says Derek. "You're right. Both of you are. Maybe I'm just off doing something else. Maybe I'm not there. I mean, I did just say I hate government work. Maybe that's why I don't show at Elysium." Derek closes his eyes. He thinks back to the vision, tries to scan the crowd. Once again, he sees hundreds of kindred, but no Nosferatu. I couldn't see any Nos. "Well, that's a problem," says Chimera. "Or maybe that's how they want it. I'm not sure how much more we can shake out of this when we don't even know what the other major option brings us. If Aaliyah's rule puts the Inquisition in the streets with flamethrowers, well, at least we know Sue's won't be too bad. Okay, let's check the other ending then, says Derek, closing his eyes. Feels almost unfair that we can do this, says Chimera. Hesitantly, she looks around at everyone. Didn't say I have any problem with it, though. Derek fixes Aaliyah's face firmly in his mind, inhales deeply, and closes his eyes. This time the vision comes almost immediately. There's no National Gallery this time, no Grand Elysium. Instead, the first thing Derek sees is 3 figures, shrouded in shadow, gathered around a circular wooden table in a room lit only by ambient moonlight shining through a window. It takes a few seconds to register what he's seeing, but as he takes in the shapes of the heavy bookshelves groaning under the weight of hundreds of tomes, barely visible beyond the periphery of the scene, it dawns on him. It's ciphers in a sanctum in the chantry. The central figure, a slender feminine silhouette, obviously Aaliyah, clears her throat as she lays a finger on a map in front of her. A map of Melbourne, covered in coloured borders, labels, and other minutiae. What situation is developing in the west? She asks. Mr. Merriweather has informed me that tensions are beginning to surface among the Ventru. To her left, a masculine silhouette wearing insectile mandibles for a jaw shakes his head. The Gangrel have interpreted the creation of the Duskborn territory as a threat, he says. My clan has been keeping a close eye on the developments. The Gangrel are embracing in secret their neonates encroaching on Ventru domains. So far, we have ensured that the most egregious breaches have been dealt with. Aaliyah nods, turning her attention to the figure on her right. And what of our other options? What insight has the cobweb provided? The other figure leans forwards, revealing his gaunt face and dishevelled hair. It's Stan, the Malkavian, patient zero. The embraces have been ordered by Thomas Roth, he says. An attempt to pad the deck with one-drop creatures, I think. Get ahead of the mana curve. If it's allowed to continue, the Ventru will eventually have no choice but to employ creature removal. It'll be an interesting match. Once again, Aaliyah nods imperiously. Very well, she says. She jabs her finger at the map again. Have the Malkavians continue to run premonitions to uncover any unforeseen variables. The Nosferatu shall monitor Roth's movements and... The finger with the insect jaw nods in acknowledgement. Ediz and his hounds will make him disappear at an opportunistic moment. Mr. Merriweather shall play his part as seneschal and paint the picture that Roth has simply moved on to another domain. Aaliyah's co-conspirators nod, their orders understood. They shall remove the growing tensions and restore peace among the clans with a single surgical strike, like a doctor removing a cancer before it can infest the bloodstream. The vision ends. A strange, unsettling feeling stirs in the back of Derek's mind. Hope reads Derek's expression. This one's not so good, huh? You could say that, says Derek, obviously shaken. He recounts what he saw. I mean, it's about what I'd expect from a clan of shadow assassins. Yeah, she does have strong Ra's al Ghul energy. Hope glances over to Chimera. I'm guessing this switches your consideration over to Hal Nah. Well, the Nas are still in the picture, at least. Mandibles. Spider-head mandibles. Some possibilities there. The situation with the Nas tells me there's something we still have to uncover about either Sue or the Nas. Let me give my friend a call. Hope steps away from the group and rings up Duncan Wells. The dial tone barely registers in Hope's ears before there's a click. Duncan nervously says, Hello? You get the impression that he's been waiting for this call, eager not to piss her off. Hey man, you in a place you can talk? Safely, I mean. Give me a second, he says. Derek and the others watch as Hope steps away, leans over The wall peers down into the streets below. She hears the sound of voices in the background fading rapidly. Okay, go! Thanks. Okay, how hooked into the rest of the NAS was Spider, and how much did he talk about it with you? We've hit a situation we're trying to decipher, and the NAS factor in somehow. Well, from what I know, he wasn't too popular among his clan, and Noz in this city don't like that he threw him with the Anarchs. Yeah, about that. Are most of the Nosferatu here in the Camarilla? And by any chance is Spider's sire a dude with similar mandibles? Not Spider's sire himself, I don't think, but his parents maybe. Some Nos are in the cam, but since the, Duncan fumbles for a moment. Since the, Banny Keems? Yeah, since they showed up, the Nos don't really have their niche anymore. A lot of them like to do their own thing. I guess that makes them Anarchs by default, but not Sue's Anarchs. Okay, could be that simple. Next question. Do you know if Sue has something against the Nosferatu or vice versa? Has she been acting weird around them? Did they piss her off at some point? Well, you know, Spider didn't keep me that in the loop, especially about his clan, but what you're asking about sort of an open secret among all the Anarchs. Surprised you haven't picked up on it. It was the Nos that uncovered the location of the old prince's haven, apparently. Oh, says Hope. Oh, shit, okay, yeah. That makes sense now. Thanks. I'm trying to decipher a vision. You know how it goes. Consider a month knocked off your service. This helps. Well, I'm glad I could help, Duncan says, his voice tinged with relief. Let me know if you need anything else. There's a beep and a click, and the line is dead. Hope turns around, fills in the coterie on the news she got from Duncan. Bad blood between Sue and the Anarchs. Seems like she blames them for her sire being found by Squizzy. So either she has them kicked out or blood-hunted, or simply doesn't offer them a spot. Explains why they don't want anything to do with anyone, says Chimera. Yes, by the way, my sire getting axed by Aaliyah's command is absolutely a deal-breaker, let alone the rest of that, assuming it's the real deal. Even if it isn't, it's indicative that she'll rule in a way that wouldn't work for at least 2 of us. Hope glances at Derek. Maybe 3. Yeah, says Chimera thoughtfully. They were in Cypher's chantry, but Derek? It didn't seem like anyone from your clan was there. Derek shrugs. Can't say I'm a huge fan of the whole rule from Shadow's angle, especially if it's from Cypher's sanctum. Where's that leave the rest of the chantry? On the political outskirts, most likely, says Chimera. People like Aaliyah usually have an inner circle of advisors and trusted thugs, and use people with too many brains and morals as tools or services to command from the safety of the night. Pout creeps onto her face, which is why the cam is a stupid idea in the first place. Oh shit, says Hope softly, a thought occurring to her. She's in the chantry, and she's using Malkavians for premonitions when clearly Tremere can do the same as well. She quietly disappears her problems. What if she retires the Tremere once she's in power, and drives them all out of town? Well, it didn't fill me with the most confidence when I realized where she was, but there weren't any Tremere in the room to speak of, says Derek, his lips thin, and her clan can handle the blood sorcery aspect, so why would she need us? In either case, we'll want to at least have an idea for something for the Gangrel, seeing as how they were a focal point in both visions. Yeah, sounds like they give territory to the Thin Bloods and are trying to make up for that by doing a political move against the Ventru, so I don't know. Maybe we can make sure the other clans give some turf over too when the time comes, so the Gangrel don't shoulder all the burden? Maybe. In the Sioux version, corrects Derek. In the Sioux version, he's just angry because the Thin Bloods have left few places for the fledglings to go. But in the Aaliyah one, he was outright starting a rebellion. Unless, of course, this means Aaliyah's just off the table. Well, she's off the table for Chimera. I'm gonna say half the table for me too. Government by secret police is a bad idea. Hope remembers Sage's stories. I don't want to get Trotsky'd. I'm still not 100%. Not yet, says Derek thoughtfully. It'll take a lot of convincing on her part. While the Print Zoo outcome seemed overall more what we're going for, it did seem very chaotic. Hope nods. That's fair, man. I still want to make good and get Aaliyah that Primogen seat regardless. She's impressed me overall, but Prince? Maybe no. Anyway, anything else? Before anyone can answer, a whoop of jubilation suddenly emanates from the nearby stairwell. A metal door bursts open and out runs Slick, grinning ear to ear while waving what looks like a square piece of cardboard wildly around. "Oh yeah!" Slick shouts, fist pumping with his free hand. "Check it out! That was my 10th order this month! That means I get a large pizza for free!" Leaning against the knee-high brick wall on the edge of the roof, Emily rolls her eyes. "Oh, right, yeah, that stupid loyalty card." Hope laughs. "Fucking awesome, man. I remember when my family used to fill out those Subway cards, back when they were still doing that. When you poor as shit, free sandwiches are the bomb." 10 orders a month, says Chimera thoughtfully. It's the 4th of April. With a flourish, Slick displays the piece of cardboard proudly, holding it up against his vest so everyone can see it clearly. There's a Domino's logo in a corner, but aside from that, barely anything can be made out. The entire thing is covered in doodles of stick figures sword fighting or playing instruments. Most of them have mohawks, but somewhere in amongst all that, 10 little pizza slice stamps can be seen, all lined up in a row. "I dialed another order while you were talking about princes and stuff, and the driver just gave me the last one I needed." Whistling gleefully, Slick fumbles in the pocket of his jeans, fishes out his wallet, and flips it open. There are at least 3 other identical cards jutting out. He proudly slides the loyalty card he's holding in with the others, right next to his driver's license, and stuffs the wallet back into his pocket. "So, anyway," Slick says, scratching his mohawk, "it's a big no to the Banu Hakim lady, yeah?" "No to Prince, unless Vince has an angle he wants to work," says Hope, eyeing Vince, who is still calmly contemplating the streets below, deep in thought. "Tell her politely once we're back together." Slick returns to the stairwell, retrieving an oil-drenched Domino's box. As he leans up against the AC unit next to Hope, he flicks it open, and is already halfway through a slice by the time she even registers his presence. The name Simon is scrawled on the lid of the box in black marker. "Simon? What?" asks Slick through a mouthful of pizza. "Oh, right." He swallows. "Well, they wouldn't let me order under Slick." Instantly, he recognizes that he's just revealed something about himself. "Oh, wait," he says, peering intensely into the box. "Your name is Simon?" says Emily, spending all her willpower to try and stifle a laugh. "Really?" "No, his name's Slick now," Hope says. Ignoring Hope, Emily steps forwards, hands on her hips. "Slick, give me your wallet," she commands. Producing a noise somewhere between a moan and a snarl, Slick once again fishes his wallet from his pocket, hands it to her. Emily snatches the wallet before he even has a chance to raise his hand. Like a woman possessed, she flips it open, slides out his driver's license, and reading it, snorts with barely concealed amusement. Finally, she flips it around so everyone can see. Slick's real name, Simon Eugene Randall Jr., is emblazed in bold typeface next to a photograph that is mostly mohawk. Once Emily's had her fun, she slips the license back into the wallet and tosses it at Slick's feet. Emily is doubling over with laughter. Slick hangs his head in embarrassment. "Well, there you go," he says. "Secret's out." He ponders the pizza box on his lap. Then he shrugs and grabs another slice. Ah, well. This seems to disturb Vince's reverie. He shifts, yawns, stretches his hands and turns around to face the coterie. Alright, it's time we speak to Aaliyah again. You guys come with me. Simon, he smirks devilishly, you too, be yourself. Hope nods and follows behind Vince. Remember, we're going to be working for her one way or the other, she cautions. Vince looks back at the group before opening the door. Don't mention the visions. We don't have anything but speculation and concerns. Hope nods. The coterie steps back into the restaurant. A waiter stands at Aaliyah and Ediz's table when they arrive, refilling the pot of tea. Thank you, says Aaliyah graciously, shooing the waiter away. She carefully swivels in her chair to face the coterie. You have returned, she says, gesturing towards the empty seats across from her. Please, let us continue where we left off. As he sits down, Vince is a picture of stoicism. My Tremere friend has expressed some concern about the prospects of his clan. They're in a rather precarious position. I'm sure you understand. Thoughts? Dees leans forwards in his seat and opens his mouth to speak, but Aaliyah silences him. She regards Vince carefully, looking him up and down, sizing him up. Finally, she gives him a knowing smile. Vince rolls a manipulation etiquette check, getting 6 successes. You must understand, begins Aaliyah carefully. The chantry did not always command the respect that they do in these modern nights. When the Camarilla and the Masquerade were but new inventions, relations between the Tremere and other clans, particularly those who they saw as infringing on their nascent monopoly of blood magic, were strained. The Tremere cemented themselves within the Camarilla early, but in doing so they enacted great harms on their rivals. She reaches for the pot and refills her cup of tea, letting her words sink in as the liquid flows into the cup. If the Banu Hakim are to ever feel secure within the Camarilla, these wrongs must be accounted for. I have no intention to deprive your friend here of his right to exist. Let that be known, but measures will be taken to ensure that the Tremere clan feel this accounting. A fraction of their power would need to be given over. In good faith, of course. Hope is suspicious and rolls insight, with only 1 success. She can't read what Aaliyah is alluding to. Vince raises an eyebrow. Sins of the father? Really? Aaliyah gingerly lifts the cup to her lips, takes a sip of tea. The entire restaurant is silent, save for the clink of fine china as she places the cup back on its saucer. Not sins of the father, a mere transferal of power. Many of their ancillae are embraced from particularly potent blood. My clan is much smaller and our blood far less potent. It is about equality. Hope inhales. She remembers the old lore Derek cited about Tremere consuming Zamisi to strengthen the clan. This was, after all, Aaliyah continues, the traditional way of my clan. All must be balanced. Power should rest within the hands of those who will not abuse it. That is what brings us closer to Hakim. I think what they're concerned about, interrupts Ediz, is specifically how this will affect Derek and whether he'll be allowed a seat at the table. He catches Aaliyah glaring at him through the corner of his eye. If I may be permitted to speak out of turn, my sire. Aaliyah loudly scoffs. It's quite unlike her. Derek here is too young and his blood too diluted to need worry about it. There will be Tremere in this domain after the accounting, and he may very well rise to a position of power among them. I am chiefly concerned with Cypher and those whose vitae remains close to the accursed thieves and usurpers. Hope raises a hand. Aaliyah peers at her, vaguely annoyed. Do you have something to add? As a member of the clan of the eldest, you should have your own feelings on this matter. Elder... Oh, is that Zamis's formal title? I have to admit, I'm not a very good representative of my clan. The only other one I've met was not to my liking. He is traditionally considered the first embrace of the 3rd generation. Hakim notwithstanding, of course, but our founder is not counted within the same lineage as yours. This is another reason why I'm very glad to get to talk to you on good terms. There's lore here I really need to know about at some point, but I'm thinking this feels like a clan policy. This isn't just your views on the matter. This is something that your clan decided, yes? Aaliyah nods. Without entering into specifics, you could say as much. Hope nods to Vince and quietly takes a seat. Takes her tea. So, it's something you'd have to enforce to show the rest of your faction that you were following the decisions. In fact, there's probably quite a bit more to this. In order to gain support and backing from the rest of your clan, you'd have to satisfy them as well as the local powers. Once again, Aaliyah nods. I may be the oldest and greatest among the Banu Hakim in this domain, but our clan is ancient, and for the most part we retain these ancient ties. Kindred far older and wiser than I have decided where our place within the Camarilla lies. Do not misunderstand, I align fully with these goals, but I am also not interested in power for the sake of power. I wish for all within this domain to remain safe and prosperous under the guidance of the Banu Hakim. Thank you, Hope nods. That answers that question for me. Vince looks down at his cup. The tea that he didn't drink earlier is now cold, no longer producing steam. He looks over at Aaliyah. Pretend I'm any given Trevere. What does your praxis change for me, day to day? Aaliyah narrows her eyes at Vince. Are you an ancilla within the chantry? The regent's right hand? One of the regent's advisors? She asks. If not, your existence each night remains the same. You operate and hunt within your accepted domain, are afforded the same rights as any member of the Camarilla, and may levy any concerns with your chosen representative to be passed on to me. So long as the traditions are respected, nothing changes. And if I am one of those figures? Vince gingerly asks. The neutral look on Aaliyah's face quickly morphs into a frown. Then I would be concerned, for the power you have hoarded for centuries will soon be taken and redistributed to those more deserving of it. But do not worry, Mr. Merriweather. There is nothing to be fearful of. Equity merely feels like oppression to those who have power. There would be one small change, Aaliyah finally says. Until now, the Tremere have held a monopoly on blood magic within the Camarilla. This shall end. The Thaumaturges shall reveal their secrets to the Banu Hakim, and our blood sorcerers shall do likewise. Along with the diablerie of their ancillae? Hope asks, pointedly. Unless I misunderstood what you're saying between the lines, in which case I apologize. Vince nods. He's not equipped to evaluate exactly why, but most of Aaliyah's proposals have seemed off about him. But this seems fine to him. Hope's interjection quickly causes him to reevaluate. Instantly, Aaliyah reels on the spot, glaring at Hope, her eyes flashing red with intense anger. How dare this fledgling question me? These are the words expressed silently on her face as she begins to stand. Quickly taking initiative, Ediz rises from his chair, standing between the two kindred. He holds out the palms of his hands to his sire, carefully showing her that he is not a threat. Easy, he says, slowly. Hope's just asking a question. She's just a fledgling. Not everyone understands the old ways. Hope bows her head and closes her eyes. Tension hangs in the air for several minutes. The two Banu Hakim, sire and child, silently glaring at each other. Eventually, Aaliyah relents. She sighs and the glow in her eye fades. Apologies, she says. She takes her seat. Many have judged our ways. I sometimes forget that this domain is full of young kindred. You've given no offense, Hope says. Ediz is correct that I'm ignorant in many ways. Diablerie, Aaliyah continues, dragging out the word. You have no reason to act as if that is the deal breaker, not when two members of your coterie have already indulged in it. And I'm not judging because, yes, that is why, Hope says. I have stood by and done nothing while my friends did that. Aaliyah stares into Hope's face. It's hard to read her expression. It's neutral, imperious once again, but There's a hint, a hairline crack in her facade. What you call diablerie, that which you sneer at with righteous anger, is the natural way of our kind, and the traditional punishment enacted by my clan, she says, her voice level. Once, an age ago, we were the judges and lawmakers of the kindred. The civilization you benefit from today is built upon the decrees of my clan's elders. When the laws were broken, or when kindred fell completely to their beasts, it was we who were most often tasked with bringing them to heel. Their blood wasted was taken and reappropriated to those who needed it the most as payment, those who protected and sustained kindred society. And the Tremere, at the very least those who have been walking the earth for longer than the average neonate, are complicit in a great crime against us that was never fully accounted for. Clever political move, Hope says, tilting her head, rotating it a bit too far for any normal person's neck as she looks back at Derek, owl style. Sitting beside Aaliyah, Vince could swear his stomach is churning. This doesn't feel right. Why doesn't this feel right? Tremere also get much oversight from afar, and there's no way to keep a cull of their ancilla quiet from the rest of the Camarilla. So within a domain where that happens, any who remain and don't act as a resistance to the Banu Hakim, I'm thinking they'll be treated as traitors by the rest of their clan, by their elders anyway, so it would force the local Tremere to choose between Melbourne or their clan. There will be no attempt to deceive the people of this domain, Aaliyah says, the tone of her voice rapidly increasing. It will be brought to light what the Tremere have done, and they shall be held accountable by the people and their punishment administered. Those who remain will be welcomed by the court as protective members of society. All will understand it is for the greater good. At least, that's my read on the situation, says Hope, meeting Aaliyah's gaze with her own. Fledgling and elder, but to everyone else for this brief moment, Hope looks as if she's on equal terms with her opponent. Hope's words are piercing, subtly damning. Maybe it's because of her earlier outburst, but Aaliyah seems much less guarded all of a sudden. She's speaking her truth. Those who do not respect the traditions, who pose a threat to the security and the safety of this domain, will be made to leave, either willingly or at the hands of the sheriff and his hounds. Chimera loudly scoffs. Those are some cutting words, she thinks. There is no long-term room for the anarchs in Aaliyah's system. Incorporation and assimilation or expulsion. This sits very poorly with Chimera. There will be no repeats of what happened with Father Patrick or what transpires now with Thornton Adams or Seneschal Smith. Nor will there be anarch agitators whose actions threaten the masquerade. We shall all work together to ensure that the traditions are followed, and we shall be content that we are safe and we are hidden from those who would destroy us. Hope and Aaliyah continue staring into each other's eyes. Silence for a few seconds. It seems to stretch out into eternity. Finally, Hope nods. Thank you for explaining. She looks to Vince. Forgive my ignorance, says Derek, suddenly piping in. Wouldn't that mean the ones we'd have to look out for are the ones in charge? He crosses his arms. Vince's cockiness is back, but it's more deliberate than before. He raises an accusative eyebrow, looks straight at Aaliyah and says, "You seem on edge." "As you said," says Derek, adding on to Vince's words, "would be assimilate or be ashed." Tense silence once again fills the restaurant. Still standing between the coterie and his sire, Ediz exchanges nervous glances with Hope. The look on his face says quite plainly, "You're treading on thin ice." Aaliyah's facade of serene wisdom is almost entirely shredded, her hair jutting out from under the hem of her black hood, dishevelled, her scarf askew, her powerful gaze sweeps back and forth between Derek, Vince, and Ediz, her lips curled into a snarl. "It is for the good of all," is all she can muster. "An observation," says Chimera, picking up her hand. She shifts forward in her seat. She's bided her time enough. Hope closes her eyes at the sound of Chimera's voice. "Oh God, I'm gonna have to go owl in a tea shop." "For the good of all seems to be something of absolute paramount importance to you," says Chimera. "Equality, fairness, retribution. You've got a lot of history at play here, a lot of clan members to appease, and a whole lot of beliefs pushing you forward." She crosses her arms, unimpressed by the display of ideological inconsistency. "You've got a lot of good ideas, but you lack something fundamental to a good, functional world. Diversity. What you're proposing turns you into a king in a high tower, surveying your lands that you've cultivated. There is no room for anything outside your beliefs, and nobody outside your beliefs. The anarchs, my people, will suffer for this, and I know that you know that you cannot possibly win a fight against your own ideals." Staring straight at Chimera, Aaliyah wraps her fingers tightly around the teacup in front of her as she lifts it, trembling. The crinkle of breaking china pierces the silence. Aaliyah's grip, tighter than a vice, sends a web of hairline cracks crisscrossing over the surface of the cup. Tea begins to dribble out the bottom, creating small brown stains on the tablecloth. In front of the coterie, Ediz clenches a fist, while his other hand slowly enters his coat, where Hope can just make out the hilt of a blade, sitting just inside the hem. It's taking all Aaliyah's strength to stave off her beast, her face contorting in a mixture of pain and anger as she fights the oncoming frenzy. Seemingly oblivious to the now shattered cup dangling from her fingers, she stares straight into Chimera's face. "Choose your next words carefully," she splutters. "Are you a friend or a foe, mangy dog?" "We are allies," Hope says firmly. "Isn't that right, Chimera? Allies!" The coterie is asked to roll wits and awareness. See if they see something. Between them, they get 6 successes. It's not enough to beat Aaliyah's 10. Aaliyah's gaze is met with fire and glinting lizard-like pupils. Small indents of scales and patches of hair are starting to pop up on Chimera's face alongside a small snarl. Before they simmer back down, she finally cools off. "I'm trying to be a friend, but you're making that hard. Please," Hope whispers. "We want you to have respect. We want to get you that primogen seat. We entrust you with a warning of coming doom. We are allies." As Aaliyah takes in Chimera's words, her insistence that the gangrel is trying to be friends, her left hand, the one not grasping the shards of china that used to be a teacup, curls around something unseen at her waist, almost as if she's holding something. "The same question for all," she says through gritted teeth. "Are you with me or are you against me?" "I am with you," Hope says. "I will do everything in my power, make sure you gain your primogen seat and survive the Second Inquisition." She glances at Emily and Slick hovering on the periphery of the room and motions to the door. The 2 thin bloods don't wait to be told twice. They quickly exit the building. Aaliyah and Ediz don't even seem to notice. Vince stands, tries to get a surreptitious look at what Aaliyah's holding, but he can't quite see it, if there's anything there at all. While he does this, he makes an effort to seem sympathetic and a little out of his depth. "I need a little time to think. I'm sure you understand. There's a lot riding on this for me and mine." He smiles his best bear with me smile. Vince makes a charisma, etiquette plus presence check. Gets a bonus die for Hope and Chimera's insistence that they're trying to be friends. He rolls 6 successes, bolstering it with willpower, turning this into 8 successes altogether. Aaliyah rolls a messy crit. 6 successes. Not enough to beat Vince. There's something in Vince's words. Even an elder of the Banu Hakim isn't prepared for the sheer charisma that oozes from his mouth. Standing over the elder, calmly taking one last sip from his tea before carefully placing the cup back on the saucer and brushing his hand against the breast of his tailored jacket. He looks the very picture of a Ventru who's about to be given a primogen seat. Suddenly, the flashes of anger retreat from Aaliyah's face. Her snarling lips curl once again into a neutral smile. As she realizes the cup in her hands is broken, she brushes it away, sending the pieces of glass scattering to the floorboards. And then she leans back in her chair, the wind taken out of her sails. Before everyone's eyes, her and Ediz's faces begin to warp and flutter as if they are pieces of fabric blowing in the wind. And then, Aaliyah's obfuscate is dropped, and the 2 Banu Hakim are before the coterie in their true forms once again. Aaliyah's left hand clutches the hilt of an antique Middle Eastern scimitar, its wickedly curved blade anointed with what looks like fresh blood. "Go!" the elder commands the coterie. "You have said your piece. Count yourselves lucky to be walking free tonight." Hope stands, bows, and takes Chimera's hand in her left, Derek's in her right, and does her best to leave with them. Vince lingers just a moment longer, waiting for everyone to leave. Derek peers over his shoulder, glancing at Aaliyah one last time as Hope drags him away. "It's been a pleasure," and he gives a mock bow with his free arm. The coterie wastes no more time. Hope exchanges one last glance with Ediz, his face stern but relieved, before she leads Chimera and Derek out of the restaurant and into the night. "The rest of my party wants a bit of privacy," Hope shouts to the kitchen as she goes past. "Please give them 20 minutes or so to compose themselves." "Have a good night." Only Vince remains as he watches the glass door shut behind the coterie. Aaliyah contemplates his back. "You will be an effective primogen," he hears her say. He doesn't face her. "Yeah, I will. You would be an effective prince, too." The conditional tense is deliberate, and with that, Vince is gone. Outside, Hope, trembling, looks to Vince as he emerges. "Way better, way better at the head-on stuff. Thank you. I thought she was going to ash all of us then and there." Vince runs a hand through his hair. "Yeah, well." Slick whistles as he skips stones across the car park. "So, banned from that place. Add it to the list. Is why I stick to Domino's. They can't ban you from all of them." The next night, as darkness once again falls upon Melbourne, and Hope feels the blood begin to animate her dead flesh, she instinctively reaches for her phone, swipes her finger on the screen and pulls up the internet browser. She begins to browse her feeds, just as she does every night, and then she reads tonight's top headline, and a lingering triumph at getting through her meeting with Aaliyah unscathed instantly dissipates. Bizarre disappearances mystify Brunswick. Victoria police are baffled at the unexplained disappearance of 7 people from a cafe in Brunswick last night. The staff of the establishment, which remains open until midnight, were reported missing after a manager arrived in the early hours of this morning to discover the establishment still open, but with no signs of life inside. The whereabouts of the 7 people, including 4 waiters, 2 kitchen staff and a general manager, are currently unknown, and although police have ruled the vanishing suspicious, a spokesperson told The Sun today that no signs of foul play were discovered within the location. Everything was just as if they were in the middle of a normal shift, stated the Victoria police representative. It's as if they suddenly popped out of existence. Photos of 7 missing cafe staff are emblazoned across the top of the article. Hope recognised them instantly. She told them to have a good night as she led the others out of the cafe.